Good afternoon. Would you please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance? Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have just one public input card, and that's from Dr. Tibbetts.
Very complicated to talk to you today because you've got tonight and you've got this afternoon and we sort out which is which. Well, I'm not coming tomorrow morning.
What's tomorrow morning?
I think you make it about.
Questions that I wonder about. There was a huge increase, like $2 million for salaries, K through 12 salaries. And to pay for this, it looks like we took a lot of things that we were going to buy for the schools away to come up with $2+ million. So if you didn't catch that, I would ask you to look at it as you're sorting through the proposal this afternoon. The other question that I had is talking about income. And there seems to be a real discrepancy in terms of anticipated income from impact fees. It drops precipitously. It goes 15 million, 15 million, 13.366 million, then back up to 15. I want to know what's going on in 2021 that someone knows already that we're not going to be getting as many impact fees. I mean, because this person can make an awful lot of money selling short in the stock market. So I would love to have an explanation of that. The rest of my stuff will wait for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Moving on then to our agenda of 3.01, the 5-year capital plan, Kelly Randall, and she can explain some of what you asked in that second part. She is the one you want to talk to.
Can you still hear me well enough? Thank you. Board members, board chair, superintendent, thank you for this opportunity to share the capital plan, the proposed capital plan for 2020, 2024. I have one. Let me go ahead and I'll speak up. I'm going to refer to these as fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 24 because it gets pretty confusing with the 2020s and the 2021s and the rest of that. So I'm going to try to remember to do fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 24, okay? Just a reminder, per our interlocal agreement with the county governments, we should have a fairly good draft to them by August 15th for them to make any comments on. If we don't have any major changes after this workshop, we'll actually give it to them at our quarterly planners meeting this Thursday. And then we are required to adopt it by September 15th. At that point, it goes into the Florida Department of Education by the end of September. It's due October 1st to them. Just a reminder on our revenue sources, we really have 3 primary sources of income for capital. One is our property tax, 1.5 mil ad valorem. It's the most flexible money. The impact fees are used for new growth, and the sales tax proceeds are used, they've been designated for renovations, technology infrastructure upgrades, and major capital renewal. And per our discussion last year, I've actually added on page 2 of the actual capital plan a color coding chart for that. So You remember the ad valorem basically shows up as white, the sales tax, I believe, is blue, and the impact fees, nope, I'm sorry, sales tax is the orangey kind of color, and impact fee revenue and projects are in blue, light blue. So what do we see in revenue? Our ad valorem has had an increase. We've done a conservative projection on impact fee revenue. You've received a draft copy of the impact fee study. It has gone down slightly. We have sent that to the county for review and are working with them on a schedule for workshopping and reviewing that with them for adoption. And the decrease is about 4% for single-family houses, 11% for multifamily units, and about 19% for mobile homes. Because most of our units in Lake County that we've been building are single-family, we've actually been fairly conservative. A 4% drop was about a little less than $400 a unit. So we've been fairly conservative on our impact fee revenue generations, and we are, of course, all of that is pending the county's actions on adopting that. And there's been a slight increase in sales tax revenue. We have, Scott can probably do this better than I can, but we have very minimal funding from the state. They have cut our PICO new construction funding that we were receiving. We had been receiving, even though it wasn't very much. We were getting a little bit. And so we are not receiving that anymore. We still do receive some CO and DS money. Most of that goes to paying debt service, but we do get a little bit above that. But again, that's very restricted money. It has to go to a certain type of project that has to be in our educational plant survey and then has to be on our project priority list. So it's very restricted money. And we have a total revenue projected of about $443 million, and that includes $72 million in carryover, which you can think of as savings. It's basically money that we knew we were going to designate to a project, but we had to accumulate it in order to spend it. So that will show up in the first year of the revenue. So you can see we have capital outlay revenue of about $35 million, trending slowly upwards. Sales tax revenue starting in this first year at about $16 million. The impact fees, and I'm going to address Dr. Tibbetts' question. A few years ago, we were out of high school concurrency capacity. And at that time, in order to move the Lake Minneola High School addition forward and provide that capacity, we entered into proportionate share mitigation agreements with several developers. What that meant was that they made payments to us in advance, and then down the line as they built, they got impact fee credits. So basically, if you see that next line says proportionate share mitigation, LMHS, that $640,000 that we're projecting in 1920 essentially is not legally, but prepaid. It's a form of prepaid impact fees. So basically that has to come out of the impact fees when they would actually build those houses. So that money was reduced. The reduction that you see in fiscal year 21-22 was the reduction because those impact fees came to us early. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Dr. Tibbetts? Oh, I'm sorry. Can I meet with you afterwards and explain it? Okay, thank you. So that's our revenue. I don't think are there any questions on that as we're going through? You can see there's a couple of places we had carryover. Impact fee carryover of about $50 million, sales tax carryover of about $19 million, and a few other smaller amounts that added into that total of $72 million. Our ongoing expenditures, we had a line in there because of state statute that was an ad valorem share for charter schools. That's been suspended, and Scott's theory is that when they bring us back, when they give us back PICO money, we may have to do that again, but for right now, we we don't have to do that share. We've managed to keep maintenance and transportation funding consistent, meeting some of those needs that we have every year for that. And I've increased it slightly in the last 2 years. We are building a backlog of maintenance. We're being able to address that a lot better than we have been in the last couple of years, but we really need to start continuing to increase that when we can.
Kelly, you say we have a backlog of maintenance. Could you expound on that just a little bit?
So there for quite a while, we really weren't able to fund our maintenance department to the extent that we should have been.
Okay.
And so, there's a lot of issues with chillers, with just general maintenance that we need to catch up on. And so,
The big items that
the
we were
big
not able to
items,
fund.
right.
Okay.
So last year, we were really able to increase the maintenance budget significantly. And so this year, we're able to increase it even more. It stays at $8 million for the first couple of years, and that's just a pure capital funding, not the transfer to the general fund. And then in the last 2 years of the plan, because our ad valorem is increasing, we increased that to $10 million a year for those last 2 years.
And is some of that also because of our payout of our owed debt?
Yes, yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
partially. Last year's big increase really was when that first came through. The portable lease transfer, we increased that to reflect really what we're paying in portables. And then I've decreased it when the Four Corners K-8 opens in fiscal year 22. We have 20 plus portables at Sawgrass Bay that hopefully, that growth doesn't overtake us again. Hopefully we'll be able to send those back or use them somewhere else in a better fashion. There were 2 line items in there, environmental projects and safety and security. Those were state mandates from PICO funding. Since we're not getting any PICO funding, we've taken those and zeroed those line items out. We have maintained the line items because if PICO funding comes back, we'll have to put those back in. It was about $250,000 a year total for both of those lines. And I do want to specify that is not the same as the 0.75 mil safety and security funds. I want to make sure everybody understands that's totally separate line item. So our ongoing expenditures, I don't think there's any surprises here or anything that we really need to go over too much. Everything is really staying pretty consistent. I feel actually much better about this than I have in years, honestly. We'll be able to replace our buses, our white fleet, see those nice vans that, maintenance is replacing 15-year-old trucks with. And, so.
I know this is just a 5-year projection, but looking at, it's on, I don't know, can you guys hear me? If you're looking at the white fleet replacement, at some point would that become just maybe maintenance or white fleet maintenance? How long do we keep replacing and turning over the old vehicles? What's the projection for that?
Until
Beyond
we
5
can
years?
we probably don't have that entirely. We were quite behind.
Right, I knew
And
that.
I know we were trying to get to the point where we were able to replace 10% of our vehicles every year. So I think we've only had this funding in for probably the last 2 years.
That's what I was thinking.
I think we should probably have another 2 or 3 years beyond this, and then we should be at the place where we can cut it down and go to just straight maintenance and a strict replacement schedule. I know one of the things that, and John can probably talk about this in more detail, is that he's had to replace some specialty vehicles, which tend to be a little bit more expensive.
Sure.
So,
That's what I was wondering too, like 600,000 doesn't, some of the things that we see out there are really nice. I think there were some out there, but like how many is that giving us a year? And is there a projection for what we're buying every year and all that stuff? So it's just, thanks.
yeah, he can probably provide you more specific information on it. New capacity, this is where it gets kind of fun for me, is that we have our Four Corners K-8 is fully funded. We're actually going to be able to build something, and so I know they're working on that and hopefully be breaking ground on that within the next couple of months. And the Lake Minneola High addition is also fully funded in this year. I have increased it slightly to address parking issues. We probably are going to have to add some parking, which was not in the original scope of that project. So I've increased the funding for that. The Tavares Relief Elementary is fully funded in the 4th year of the project. And I want to reiterate, as I did last year, that if the Tavares Pinecrest School opens, they are projected to open in 2020. And if they open, that will probably relieve Tavares Elementary and those other schools in the Golden Triangle area for a little while. And we won't need that funding there, so we'll be able to move it to another area in the county that has growth and needs that funding.
But isn't Eustis Heights also at the capacity?
It is, and we've added a couple of portables there. But Tavares Pinecrest would be up to 700 plus students, and so that would probably relieve both of those schools, at least for a little while.
Okay.
But again, we're monitoring that school, seeing how it's going, and so in the next capital plan, if they are ready to open in 2020, then, you'll see changes then. But for right now, I want to make sure that we know that we have an overcrowding situation in Tavares and at Eustis.
Do we have
that
the
needs
plan
to be
for that?
addressed.
The redirect in the future, or do you know where you're wanting to redirect?
The most likely location will be the Mineola area, Mineola, Claremont. There's going to be some significant growth in that area, as we talked about in January. There's growth that we're starting to see all over the county, but with the new Turnpike interchange, Mineola is really our most likely area.
Was that the Grassy Lake?
Yes.
Eastridge Middle School relief, the K-8?
Yes.
So you're proposing that, basically?
So what we've added, after some discussions with developers and with just knowing the situation at Grassy Lake and what's going on there, we've gone ahead and added a relief school for Grassy Lake and Eastridge Middle School that will allow us to go ahead and move that funding over if it's necessary to that area. It also allows us, if we have a concurrency issue in the South County, it allows us a project to do a proportionate share mitigation against.
But
So-
do we already have property for that relief?
We do not, unless
Unless we use the Sullivan Road?
we use Sullivan Road. And there's been discussions about other possible locations.
So as I think about the Grassy Lake situation, when before I was on the board, we had 5 portables on the campus, and now we've got 10, I think.
There is a portable field for 10 in the back. So there's the 5 that are right beside it. There's 2, and then they are looking at adding probably 2 more, maybe up to 4 if that's a possibility. But it was constructed for an additional 10.
So how many total are now there? Do you know?
There's 6 right now.
There are only 6 there now. Okay.
Which is good.
But how many will be put there for this 1920 school year?
We don't know that yet. I know she has a need for probably another 2.
Okay.
And possibly up to 4, but that's more of a organizational situation.
So in the last, I guess, 5 years, we've only added 1 portable to that campus?
2,
Okay. They had 5 already on the side by the
right.
old
I'm
buses.
sorry, so did I say 6? 7.
So
I
they're
should've
7.
said
So they've
7.
added 2. So 7.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
And then we're looking at a couple more this year.
Yes.
So that puts us at like 9. So I guess if I'm thinking about the time frame before we provide the relief for Grassy Lake, we're probably looking at like 15 portables needed for that campus. Right? If we're adding a few every year, at least maybe
Well,
13, 14.
it will depend
15.
on the time frame. If
Right,
we're
right.
able to build it in 5 years, we may not be up to 15. Now, you also have
There's other dynamics, though. So you have Mineola that's getting ready to go to 8th grade.
But that doesn't help Grassy Lake.
And-
Because Grassy Lake's only K-5. Well, pre-K-5.
Oh, never mind.
So,
It helps
you know,
the Easter egg.
as a capacity issue, they probably only need another 2 this year. The reason that we're looking at putting 4 this year is that we know that they will have, probably the year after, they'd need those other 2. And actually having 6 in the back allows them to put a whole grade level back there versus having to split a grade level.
So I guess looking ahead to the budget forecast, the unweighted FTE that we forecasted showed an increase of 63 students, right, there for this coming year?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess we're seeing their enrollment numbers increase steadily.
Yes.
I guess I'm just wondering if we can wait until, I don't know, 2023, 24, 25 for a relief school. I mean, maybe at this point, should we consider a wing for Grassy Lake? And then when the relief school comes, then that's going to provide some relief over time, but, because we're going to fill the relief school also, even if there was a wing at Grassy Lake, right?
How much are the portables to put in?
The portables,
Is it
John,
200?
I don't think they're 200. Is John in here? How much are the portables to place?
Portables on the lease, are basically the portables, the cost to install them is the initial hit. And that's basically from my MEP, from my mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which on average you can say is about $45,000 to install. And then my lease price is roughly, say on average, about $1,500 per portable to lease per month.
So how many portables we was talking about? 4? So we got 180,000 just to install.
So I guess I wonder if those funds are better spent on a permanent wing.
But has Grassy Lake already had a wing? Was it
No.
Grassy Lake
No.
or Sawgrass? Sawgrass
It
had
was
the wing.
Sawgrass Bay that got the wing, and Grassy Lake got 5 portables.
Got
that are
5
placed
portables, that's right.
Where the wing should be.
That's right.
That's right.
And so now we've got ourselves in a bit of a pickle, because I think even if we build this school in 2025 or whenever we expect it to open, that's going to fill up, and Grassy Lake's still going to be full, right? And so,
But the only thing is, where would we put those portables in a temporary while we build the wing where it should be?
well,
And unfortunately, the portables that are there are not really conducive to being
They're more
moved
permanent
to,
site.
but if you're talking about adding portables into this portable field, now would be the time to do that while you still have space to do that, right? Because now if we wait 5 years to do that, and we've now filled it with portables that are full of students, then you can't do anything. You can't put the wing because you'll have no other place for the 5 other portables that are already there.
Right.
So I
Right.
guess I'm getting nervous that we're going to once again lock ourselves into a situation where we can't build a wing.
Or would be like Sawgrass Bay.
And as I
Treadway.
and as I also look at the other piece of this, people who live 2 blocks from Grassy Lake are zoned for Astatula Elementary. They can see the school from their house. They pass by it, and yet we're sending them all the way to Astatula. That just doesn't sit real well with the number of calls I get about that kind of thing. So I guess one thing I'd be really interested in knowing is, what is the cost for that wing nowadays, and do we need that as I mean, I just don't know if we can wait all the way for this relief school.
we can,
Yeah, I think, I agree with him, because it's not that I think I agree, I know I agree. But I think if we wait too long, then we've put ourselves in a corner where we don't have a place to put the students and the portables we need to house those students. So I think it's something we need to look into.
It
Okay.
does seem to see,
We can-
it's like, it's a problem we keep painting ourselves into. It's a corner. What about modulars, like they did it?
Well, that's similar to what's there now.
yeah,
As far as those 5 portables he's talking about,
Right.
that's what it's similar to, what they have at Cypress Ridge is what they put
Like
in
what they
there.
have at Round Lake, the modular?
You speak about Round Lake.
Okay,
only
Round
Put
Lake.
it
in
for the
this
middle school wing.
particular instance, a
Yeah.
wing would be a much more efficient use. Basically, it's already designed so that you just add 2-story, 10 classrooms.
They
They
go
open
in.
off an existing hallway. It's, we already have the designs, it just needs to be brought up to code. So it's more efficient than a modular design is gonna be, which needs to be designed fresh. You have to put it a certain distance away. So, in this particular case, a modular is
So what are we talking for a
not
wing?
an answer. We would have to price it out again. It needs to be brought up to code, because the last time we built it, it was not under the current building code. And it would need to be priced. The cost of moving those portables out of the way and relocating those would need to be calculated. And then we would need to figure out what the newest price would be. I think when we built it at Sawgrass Bay, it was actually in the depths of the recession, and so we got a very good price on it. Personally, I wish we had built the wing at Grassy Lake, but we we didn't, and so, you know, we're
What
where
price
we're at.
was the one at Sawgrass?
Mhm.
Oh, what was the good price that we got?
Oh, it was, I think, around $1.6 million.
Yeah.
That's exactly the number I remember.
It's less than 2 million.
That's right.
But what they got to
was-
do is they got to go tear off the exterior brick that they put on. They got to tear that off and get it back to the wall and then build out from there and the stairwell and everything else, the floor. I mean, it's what needs to be done to do it right. Yeah.
It would be a better solution, but we can go ahead and get the pricing on that and see if I can, you know, look at the plan and see how we could make that happen a little bit more quickly.
But does that hurt East Ridge? How tight is East Ridge? Because you have a K-8 planned for East Ridge, right?
Right. East Ridge has a little bit of wiggle room. They are not over capacity by any means, so you know, they probably could go a little while
Well,
longer.
the other thing to consider in all that is we seem to see 6-8 capacity pop up all over the place now suddenly, right? I mean, as all these other charters have come in and as schools are expanding to middle school and adding the one grade a year,
Yeah,
there's
we're not
potentially some
necess-
relief there for
Right.
6-8. But when we're talking K-5 here for Grassy Lake, there's just nothing immediately on the horizon here for a long time. And that's just got me nervous about.
But could it easily replace that Tavares project if the other charter, the Pinecrest opens in Tavares, that's those designated dollars
Right.
at least could flop over to this.
And I
Grassy
think that, I mean, there's a sign up for that Pinecrest
Yeah.
school. I mean, it
Yeah, there
appears
is.
they're
There
doing
is.
stuff.
How many portables do we have at Therese Elementary right now? About 10?
About that. Yeah, there's a couple of double portables, so not quite sure how to count those, but about 10.
Okay.
So would we need to, would would Grassy Lake turning it to a K-8 or a K-6?
No. Yeah, there's not enough land there for that. And middle school capacity is not really our problem right now. It's really K-5 capacity and to some extent high school. And high school is really just dependent on the area. But we will definitely go ahead and get the costs of doing the addition and then take a look at how that would work and see what we can come up with.
Have we ever considering that Treadway is like a portable city?
Yes.
Have we considered they have a lot of property? Have we considered a wing there?
Multiple times. It was on the plan when I first came to the district,
They have
and
well over 11
unfortunately,
portables.
the costs, the revenue, once our revenue dropped, unfortunately had to drop off the
But would
plan.
that make more sense since they're a relief school for the Tavares area?
They are basically full. Even, I mean, so those portables, it's not where we're gonna gain capacity.
If we build a
put-
wing with 2 stories, we wouldn't gain any capacity for Tavares?
We would be essentially replacing
The existing
the
portables.
portables, right, at Treadway.
And which-
So Treadway is at almost 800 to 900. It varies a little bit, but it runs between that. So really, you know, unless you want to build the school bigger, then you're just going to be replacing that capacity with permanent capacity.
Which
And it is a
may not
sales
be a
tax
bad
project.
idea.
It's a sales tax project, and
Right.
it's, you know, it's definitely coming along. So we'll try and move it forward as much as we can, but on a pay-as-you-go basis, then, you know, it falls when it
Right.
falls.
Because you have some
We
of
have a
those
lot of
portables that are
priorities.
locked in by buildings. The only way you're going to get them in is demolish them or crane them out.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's built all the way around it.
I mean, they are. They're in the middle.
Where is this, so we just expect this Pine Ridge School. Why do we have it there? Just to collect revenue? for
What's
the-
that?
The
The-
concurrency? Do you put these, like Tavares and the Grassy Lake Reliefs, as just concurrency holders? So you can
So
collect the concurrency?
the Tavares is essentially, if that Tavares Pinecrest school does not come through, then we have overcrowding. You know, Grassy Lake, the overcrowding is coming. It's not egregious yet at Tavares because it's, fairly, I won't say it's egregious, but, they're overcrowded and there's no place to put additional portables.
Right.
They are basically locked into
Fairly
what they are. And so, we have to have some solution for that. So the Tavares Relief School, and we know that there's growth coming to the Tavares area as well. There's a lot of development down there on 19 towards the south, and so, we know that that's coming as well. So we need to have a project. It's not necessarily a placeholder. If the Tavares Pinecrest doesn't come through, then we'll probably have to build that school. But that's why it's in the plan. And the same thing with the Grassy Lake. The Grassy Lake, if I could fully fund it, I would. I just don't have that kind of revenue yet.
With Pinecrest and its location, and you're speaking about the subdivisions that are coming that are off of 19, is there talk about where that would be divided? Because I know Pinecrest doesn't have
Well,
to
we
do.
don't do a zone for
Right, I know,
Pinecrest.
so
So, basically they'll relieve from kind of all over that
Eustis
area.
Heights, Tavares,
Right,
that area, and then
Tavares,
those could come into Tavares is maybe the picture we're getting.
Right. And they'll probably, take some kids from Dreadway as well.
Okay.
Have we seen any information on the Pinecrest opening up in the Four Corners area and what they're expecting for enrollment next year?
They are, I don't know exactly what they're going to have. We don't get those numbers until basically the first week of school when we start calling them. But I know they were projecting in I think around 400.
I guess I'm just wondering if they got there. Based on my conversations with a couple of schools we thought they were relieving, they've had very little, if any, impact on those.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
And generally, they don't share that information with us until
Which
we call and ask.
I guess kind of prompts my question. I don't know if we know the answer to this yet because it's probably about here on the 5-year capital plan. But when we talked about building this Four Corners school, we were going to open the K-8 now, and that in our vision of a future, we'd open the second school on that site, and this one would either become 6-8 or build the K-5 next door. When do we plan on doing the second school for that site?
We probably, at this point, with the Pinecrest Four Corners there, we probably would not necessarily build it on that site.
Assuming they're able to attract what they thought they'd project.
Right. I
Okay.
think eventually they will. It just takes some time for them to build. What I could envision actually is turning that K-8 into a middle school.
Right.
And then basically building
Right.
elementaries and higher, or further north.
Okay.
Higher up 27. Okay, so where were we? High school capacity.
New capacity, too.
These are largely concurrency placeholders. It gives us something to mitigate against. We are having some high school capacity concurrency issues, again, in the South County. We had addressed those with the Lake Minneola High School addition for quite a while. Helen comes to me with her bad news regularly, and so there's, still a lot of development coming. So we have put those placeholders in for concurrency projects, and they will, we may have to look at additions. We're not sure exactly what those are going to look like yet. So, but they will be capacity projects.
So speaking of South County High School capacity projects, I got a question on that one. Looking once again at the predicted unweighted FTE for next year, East Ridge High School looks like another 100. Has that been trending consistently the last few years to show increasing? Or is that, I guess I don't recall the previous year's
At what
numbers.
point is East Ridge over capacity?
That's my question.
I mean, they're huge.
East Ridge has been over capacity for as long as I've been with the district.
And once again, I know the cost of a high school, so looking at the capital plan, it's probably out here, right, so I guess my question is on this one. Wellness Way, I think, is one of our targeted areas. And I almost recall seeing something referenced in here about acquiring land or having to pay for land. Is that not part of any sort of development orders for that?
No. So Wellness Way basically has very vague language about school sites. It essentially says that they will work with the school board on school sites. So we have been working with a couple of developers. We've put out letters, basically, saying that we're interested in land, we're looking for land. We have one or two property owners that we've been talking to about a possible site, and it's actually a little further along. You did see something in the presentation about it. I don't have anything definite on that yet, but we are trying to get a site locked up as soon as possible. So that, knowing that, you know, something that size, basically, we'd rather have it locked up early than wait and be reactive. So, we are trying to be proactive on that one. And hopefully I'll have something to come back to you with. Definitely. Renovations, also fun. These are mostly sales tax projects. The Beverly Shores renovation is fully funded in fiscal year '24. That is essentially replacing those 1950s wing buildings and the portables that are on that site with permanent capacity. We don't have any definite plans for that developed yet, but we'll be working through that as we go.
So that would be something that would happen over the summer, because that's, again, what do you do with those kids that are in those buildings?
And that is one of the plans we have not fully identified.
All right.
But we will be, we'll be working through that and trying to figure out a good answer for it. The Claremont K-8, I'm gonna
Just-
start calling it,
Just
sorry?
a quick on that. Where the ball fields are to the west of that, is that our property or City of Leesburg?
At Beverly Shores, that is our property. So we could theoretically put more portables over there and just kind of shift.
Because that's like half the school. I mean, it's gonna
Yeah,
be more than a summer project.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is
it's
definitely
big.
more than a summer project.
Kind
yeah.
of like, kind of
Right.
like Claremont Middle School, when we get ready to do that, they're gonna have to be off-site, so
Right.
something may have to be looked at.
So Claremont, speaking of Claremont Middle School, the Claremont K-8, also known as the Aurelia Cole Academy, we have increased the funding slightly based on the costs that we're getting for the Four Corners K-8, and knowing that, you know, there's going to be some site work and demolition work that we're going to need to pay for there. We did receive the Castaldi approvals from the state. We had submitted for them in August. We got them the last day of June, so pretty happy with that. They approved demolition of all the buildings at Claremont Middle School, so that allows us a lot of flexibility there. They approved all but Building 18 at Claremont Elementary School, which was built in 1995.
Which
Brick
building is that?
building.
It's the very northern building.
What's in it?
I
Is it
think
the
it's
white?
maybe kindergarten, first grade.
Right,
I think it's early learning.
single-story wing on
It's
the,
Okay,
on the north side.
Right, and, yeah.
that's nothing for me.
Yes, and
It's
if
on
you're,
that, on that
Looking
side
at the
street.
school, is it on the left-hand
if
side?
on the
you're
right side.
facing the office, it's on the right side.
All right.
Yeah.
All the way at the
On
end.
the other side of the gymnasium.
There's
Okay,
a, I think
thank
there's a
you.
little pickup area.
Yeah.
On the north side of that.
Yeah.
And then Fruitland Park,
Yes.
no surprise there, they approved the two old buildings. They did not approve the 2007 building. So, but, you know, we got basically what we expected and what we needed from them, so that was good. Fruitland Park is fully funded for fiscal year '22.
So are we staying on that site then?
We have not determined that yet.
Okay.
I was gonna
So,
say,
well, it will largely depend on whether we have a use for the 2007 building at Fruitland Park.
but I thought we were also gonna try to check to see if they would allow us to do a buyout or something of that nature there.
Well, that was different. That was actually on the COPS. The COPS was not the same as the Castaldi analysis.
Okay.
So basically, the Castaldi is DOE telling us you can demolish
build
that
us is-
building or you can't.
Right.
Can we
The
lease that
buyout was on
building?
COPS.
Can we lease that building? Does it have to be student stations?
That would something I'd have to look into.
Because the city,
I
I
mean,
know
we'd
the
have to
city's
buy out the
interested in
comps
the
first.
property. We could do some sort of,
We'd have to look at the COPS first and figure out whether we can clear that and then,
When we talked about this some time ago, I did speak with our financial advisor, our bond attorney, and he said that sometimes if you've got, other collateral in the borrowing, which we do, that they'll allow you to shift value, so you can actually value it to zero and sometimes they'll even let you assign it off of the COPS. So if that's the case, we can go down that road. Some legal work, some expense, but, if we want to go down that road, it is an option.
So now that we have that, we can go forward and we'll do the rest of that analysis and figure out, I know that there's definitely cost benefits to building it on the other site, but it does leave us with that building to try and figure out, how we deal with it. And so we'll be doing that work now. So Eustis Elementary School is partially funded at the end of the plan, but we have put $100,000 into this coming fiscal year, basically to do studies. We'd like to do some structural studies on that older building, and I think that will better inform our plans as we move forward.
That'll include the maintenance the upkeep that's happening every year. Thank you.
Wait, is this Eustis Middle or the Cartwright Center?
No, this is
That's the
Eustis Elementary.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Right.
I was reading the next line down.
Yeah. The next line, as we discussed with the sales tax and just generally with our increase in ad valorem, capital renewal is basically where you go in, you take a school that is, say, approaching that 25-year horizon in our schools, and basically do a major renovation. So it could, depending on the status of the school, could include re-roofing, waterproofing, new windows, new doors, HVAC, basically whatever that school takes to get it going for the next 25 years. So really, this is the Orange County theory of planning for schools, is that basically you try to get to the point where every 25 years you're really putting a major investment into each school, and that keeps you going for that 50-year time horizon. Okay, so we'd like to get to that point as well, and I think that's a good thing to aim for. So instead of just saying, okay, we're going to have a pot of capital renewal funding, it's basically saying, here's a project that we've identified, and we know that this school has a certain amount of demands, and so we're going to go in and we're going to address all those demands at that school and get it for the next 25 years. After discussion with maintenance, basically they felt like there were a couple of candidates. Unfortunately, we can't go through and do them all at one time, but they felt like Eustis Middle School was really a good candidate for the beginning. It's not one of our sales tax projects. They have some needs that need to be met as far as HVAC and roofing and doors and windows and flooring and, just kind of that thing that makes the school look nice and fresh and everybody happy to walk into it and feels like a new school. Probably smells like a new school. You never know. So actually we have put $9 million over 3 years. I wish I could give them all of that in the first year and they could walk in and be like, wow, this is great. Unfortunately, I can't. But, maintenance felt like they could do it over a 3-year period and basically start that. And so that's kind of a start to that process of trying to make sure that we're addressing every school on a timely basis. And the next school after that was Groveland Elementary. We actually did some work in Groveland Elementary back in 2005-06, replaced some building.
Some old buildings there.
Yeah, and the new office there. They actually have a very nice front building, but the rest of the buildings towards the back were not really addressed. So this is really addressing all the rest of those buildings that are behind the new building. And they're kind of a variety of ages there too. So that's that one. And then there's actually a fairly good-sized pot of money in the 5th year of the plan for capital renewal. And as we get closer to that, then we would identify the actual projects for that and move them forward.
You can actually go there when it's raining real good and it's flooding and do a little fishing there in between the buildings.
Oh,
The pond up front
I'd rather not.
has fish in it and comes back up.
Yeah, I see kids jump the fence weekends.
Yeah.
So why would, sorry,
Oh, no, go ahead.
why would we focus, what about the Cartwright Center?
So that is a sales tax project. And so that's one of those projects that we've committed to doing with sales tax. That is actually the next project on the list after, if I remember correctly, it goes the Claremont K-8, so Claremont Elementary and Middle School, Fruitland Park,
saw it
Beverly
somewhere.
Shores, Eustis Elementary, and then the Kurt Wright Center. So that would be the next one after that.
But the modernization, I mean, it's not saying all of our schools don't need help, but is that a higher priority than putting some money into, I know that pink is which color thing? Millage?
I think it's the sales tax.
You got pink?
Orange and blue.
Orange. In my head, I call it burnt umber.
So like, I don't know, I was just thinking like 9 million into Eustis Middle School when Kurt Wright's like hurt.
But how many students does Kurt Wright have? I don't think they're using the whole facility, are they?
They have generally, I think, about 300 to 400 students every year.
Isn't that where all the capacity is at Eustis High School, though, is at that Kurt
Yes.
Wright Center? Yeah.
It is.
So I've got
So
kind of
I
some,
think Kurt Wright is more than a $9 million project. So we could save all those up, and, you know, yes, maybe we could address Kurt Wright first, but again, that just keeps adding to our maintenance backlog. So this is a way of kind of spreading things out. And again, unfortunately, on a pay-as-you-go basis, that's basically how you're doing it.
I've got some piggyback questions on sales tax, if you will.
Okay.
Because, you know, one question I did have was, well, what's coming on the horizon? And I think perhaps in our growing pains of going to the ADA compliance of the website, I'm having trouble finding the sales tax document. Again, we used to have
It is hard to find that.
we used to have a listing of it, and maybe I should just print it out like 5 years ago. I don't know, but it detailed the order and the approximate cost that we
We can-
expected. So based on that, though, if we insert this Eustis Middle modernization that was not on the original list, does anything fall off of that list? Any projects that we
it's-
promised?
So because of the ad valorem increase, if you note, there's a little 3 after the Eustis
Yeah.
Middle School modernization. That actually means that it's, and it did not print, I apologize. So my 3 subscript did not print down on the bottom. But basically, we are using a portion of ad valorem and some capital or some sales tax money. So the vast majority of the Eustis Middle School modernization is actually more ad valorem money
Oh,
So it
than
should
it
be
is.
pinky orange.
Yeah,
You're right,
I
it's
just
orange.
can't make it,
White
couldn't
with
figure
little,
out how to,
little-
you know.
Yeah, it's
put it
supposed to be
so
white
I
with like a hashtags of orange.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
But I will make sure that it's corrected and
So
so
that's why, not Kurt Wright next.
So
I mean,
it's,
Kurt
right,
Wright's
because it's,
next, but-
yeah, it's largely, ad valorem,
Where's the-
really.
So as a result of that, then we predict that all the
not
projects
on
on that
this
sales tax
Okay.
list, they're still there.
They're
Because
still
it's
in the
after
same
Fruitland
place
Park.
that they were, you know, where we had them originally.
So the other question I have, and last year we had kind of tweaked our plan by being able to pull Lake Minneola High School a year forward, is, I mean, I see what is available in the future project fund each year, but I also know that that's broken down into various buckets of money. Some of that's ad valorem, some of that is sales tax, some of that is impact fees. So just because I see $40 million carried over for future project fund, that, like, $40 million might not all be available in sales tax. Therefore, we would not obviously pull, you know, the Claremont project forward, or likewise, you know, the following year, $21 million for future project fund, but that doesn't mean we can necessarily pull Groveland forward if it's not ad valorem dollars, right? So,
Right.
so have we looked at this and to figure out, you know, all those, I mean, is there anything that can pull forward a year?
I know, because it feels like Fruitland Park is, I swear it's 2 years later than it was
No,
when
no,
it started.
no, it was always that. It was
I
always that.
assure you, it is what it is.
It rolled
It just
over.
feels like it's forever away.
Well, it was the second project on the list, and it still is. That didn't change. And second comes after the first one. So
Which is Claremont.
but everybody always thinks that we somehow, because we didn't do a 5-year bond or anything, that we've pushed that project back, and we have not. It's still right where it is.
It has not.
It has not
Yes.
changed.
There is not really anything, there's not a lot of wiggle room. So one of the things that we did last year, and it's not officially part of the plan, but it's basically looking at each of those funding sources or revenue sources and figuring out where we're spending those revenue sources every year. And so, basically, everything kind of goes down to zero in the third year of the plan. So there's very few,
Let's just use Groveland as the example, since that's the last one I mentioned. So it's a $5 million project, and then the future project fund available for the following year is $13 million. But that $13 million is either an assortment of impact fees or sales tax. It's not, $5 million of ad valorem is not available in that future project fund.
what's the project, future
What's up
project?
at the
The
top?
second line,
Oh, okay, sorry.
right, because
Yes.
that's whatever we didn't spend for that year.
Yeah,
goes in the
that's
future.
everything all
Right.
combined. So that's basically all of the balance.
So like if we were in the previous year prior to Groveland, fiscal year '21, like if we were to slide the $5 million over there, then was there not $5 million in ad valorem available? That $20 million that's there is
There
a
was
combination of
not.
impact fees or sales tax. It's
Right.
It's
So
not.
basically, when, in my balance
Yeah,
sheet,
yeah.
which is really my balance sheet, in the end of fiscal year '22, then in the capital outlay, so ad valorem, I have a little less than $500,000. And
Do we have that
in-
balance sheet?
No,
Oh.
it is more of a worksheet,
Okay.
so it's not part of the official plan.
Yeah.
But, I would be happy
Yeah,
to share it with the
I'll
board
do-
members individually. And in the sales tax, we are, again, it's fiscal year '22, it's down to $300,000.
Right. So obviously
So
that
basically,
project
that's
couldn't pull
what
forward. Right.
balances, and then, you have to pull it forward. Where we did have some money left in the end of that, which is where it's showing up in the future projects fund, is actually impact fee money.
So then could we take an impact fee type project and could that come forward a year? Because it looks like almost everything in that last year here is, they're small projects, 2 million a piece.
But is it being added to the next year so that we can have the total
It's
amount to do the
being added
project?
to the next
So we're not
year
doing
so
the
that
project
then
till
you
it
have-
totals out.
Right, then it becomes carryover that allows you to do
Right.
next year.
No,
And I would be cautious on the impact fees on being too aggressive, because we're not really sure what our impact fees
yeah,
are
depending on
gonna
the,
be.
right, certainly depending on
Right.
the
I
project.
happen to think
And-
that your impact fee number's high, because I was calculating with a reduction, it could be $1 billion and change short
Different.
of what the report showed, of
Right.
the budget.
So, I'd rather be conservative with impact fees than not. And of course, they're also very market-driven as well. So if the market goes down with those houses slower, then those funds could go down.
Well, and I feel the same sentiment, but probably also for the reason that we need to be able to kind of be able to turn with our project list, right, based on where growth happens, and I don't want to be locked into
Right.
building another Tavares Elementary School if we don't need
Well,
it based on
and-
Pinecrest.
and-
But so where I'm thinking is, I know there are some that we know we'll need, right? We know we need relief for the Mineola area, right? That's indisputable.
So one of the things that we need to be cautious about as well is that projects that are in the fourth and fifth year, for concurrency purposes, can be proportionate share mitigation projects. Once you move them into the third year, you are then committing to those developers that you are building those projects, and that capacity will be available, and they can rely on that capacity. So I am very cautious about moving impact fee projects forward.
Okay.
So what that means is Fruitland Park will actually be built.
Because it is sales tax and it is, yes.
We just need enough sales tax dollars in the
It's
bank.
year 3, right?
You can rely on that,
We can
yes.
rely on year 3.
As long as everybody still buys things.
So what are we
County.
doing at Eustis? Can you speak to what modernization we're doing at Eustis Middle?
At Eustis Middle, my understanding, and this is really from information from Calvin Wingo and from John, is that it is essentially HVAC equipment, some waterproofing, repointing brick. Really, it's just kind of all over
Maintenance.
capital renewal and maintenance, yeah. And a lot of that is part of that backlog of maintenance that we got into. They could probably give you a much better list than I can.
And is this because, in part, I mean, because we can't function like Orange County, because we don't get the funds Orange County gets.
We don't, but we can, but we can do it within the ability that we can.
Right.
And, you know, it is a good planning tool, and it's something that we should be working towards. And, you know, we talked about that when we did the big, long presentation about the timeline. That was always something that we had talked about, that we needed to move into more of a capital renewal plan, rather than letting things get down to the point where your one choice is really to replace the whole thing.
Right.
You know.
Is this in part because we're not getting PICO now?
PICO, we never really counted too much on PICO.
You didn't even
was
get $1 million,
minimal.
I think.
Yeah,
for PICO.
we were getting maybe $700,000 a year.
Yeah,
So it's really more of an increase in the
It's the increase in the ad valorem that's allowing us to
shift.
move forward with the capital renewal part of the plan.
And the significant reduction in debt that we're paying.
And the
That's true.
significant reduction in debt. We've been pretty disciplined over the last couple of years, so it was a very good thing.
6 to be exact.
So I have kind of an operational question based on this capital plan. Thinking about staffing for these types of projects. Maybe I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself here, but historically, at least the time I've been on the board, we've not been balancing more than one project at a time. And now it looks like we've got lots of projects going on. Do we have the manpower to coordinate all that, or are we going to have to maybe see something coming in the future for that department to gain some manpower? Or have we considered that from an operational side of things?
That is not really my area. I'd have to defer that to John. So, I know they've had those discussions. I
He
know.
looks very relaxed. I think he can handle 3 or 4 more schools.
Oh, you mean the actual schools, not the building, because I was like,
No, no.
that's gonna be
Building the
contracted.
schools,
Yeah,
That's
the
just
construction of the
contracted.
schools.
the construction
facility.
manager.
The oversight of all that construction.
Right.
because technically, right now, we only have one, other than David Parker, we only have one person that goes out and checks things right now.
Right, and I have another individual former, Steve Pescick, as you may recall, we've talked to him, and we will have him on retainer as, for the cover for this year. And then the following year, depending on how the construction goes, yes, we had suspended one project manager, and we will have to come back to the board to reactivate that position.
And that's about twice as many people as you had when you were building 6 or 7
was gonna
high
ask.
schools at one time.
Seriously?
No, there was quite a few,
For the first 2 years.
You had 3 project managers, and then you also had 2 or 3 that were like liaisons between the project manager and the construction manager. Yeah.
I like the concept of outsourcing. That protects us in case there's a turn down. So,
Well, and what do you
well
do?
done, John.
Yeah. What do you do once that position's finished or once those projects are built? So,
That's it. But
Right.
In the past, when I came on the board, they were still like hanging out.
yeah.
That's the problem. So
Well, then they,
He wants to
hire 'em
come
when
work
you
for
need
a
'em.
year, 2
Right.
years.
I say you hire them when you need them, or consult them. Smart.
we can't vote on that right now, but you heard the comment.
Appreciate the insight, but thank you.
Pretty much sound like you'd already done it anyway.
Well, I think we already approved it at one time.
But I have taken that into consideration for personal consideration for human hardship, because we're a project where we have an influx, and then we just have to constantly
Level
reassess,
out.
based on Kelly's fine work with how we're looking at things over a 3 to 5 year period.
That isn't.
Sorry, Kelly. Go ahead.
The only other thing that I really had was, we talked about the Wellness Way High School site. I hope to come back to you with something more definite in the relatively near future. And then we talked about major capital renewal. The only thing that I'm hearing is that I will go back and we'll look at the costs for the addition at Grassy Lake, and see what we can do about trying to get something more permanent for them. I'm not going to make any guarantees, but I will do my very best.
Well, I think it's going to be more cost-effective for us to go ahead and look at the wing versus having portables where we can't do anything then. So I think we'll be ahead of the program by doing that.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Do you
Mr.
know
Don.
that, right now, we're up to almost 10 portables, or we will be soon. And so really, the wing is just replacement for those portables. It is not, you know.
But once the wing is
permanent
done,
answer.
once the wing's done, then where we put those portables that come for the wing, then that would make it also those available at that time.
Well, you'd still have the field for 10 in the back, so.
Right. The question I had though, also earlier though, was Eustis Middle School. Don't they have portables there, out there by the track?
Not very many,
They're not
and
classrooms,
my
are they?
understanding is that they're not in very good shape.
Yeah, I think one of them was
They're
like a
not being
storage one that I was out there one time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not really a capacity issue at Eustis Middle as so much as it is just making sure that, you know, there aren't any major problems there down the road. I also came prepared to talk about property, but I think Scott is probably ready to go and would like
You're
the
more than
time.
welcome to take the time. I've got plenty of time to cover what I need.
You do? All right. Do you want to talk about property a
Yep,
little bit?
Sure do.
All right. You have also in front of you, and I don't have this on a slide, although we could bring up just the recommendations. On board docs, there were a couple of different things. You have seen this before. This is a general list of just kind of other properties that we aren't using for either schools or ancillary facilities. Some of them are leased, some of them are leased to other people, some of them are vacant properties that we either have a plan for or we don't have a plan for. And those match the map numbers. The first column matches the map numbers on the map that you also received. I don't think there's anything really new here, so instead of taking time to go over that, then what we can talk about is this list of potential properties to sell. Most of these are ones that either you as a board or other boards have already seen. The Northwest vacant properties. In 2007, the board at that time had voted to clear the titles of those properties and then sell them. Clearing the title has turned out to be quite a,
Nightmare.
for Steve more than me, but it's been a challenge, let's say that way. We did receive most of these properties back in 1948, 1949. The restrictions on them varied. Almost all of them had oil and mineral rights reserved. Some of them were given to the benefit of, I think it was titled students in the city of Lee, or students who are at schools within the city limits of Leesburg. And then there were a couple that had restrictions regarding they had to be planted with pine trees within 3 years and come back. The board, I think, way back when, mostly addressed the pine tree restriction. I don't think that's an issue with any of them anymore. The oil and mineral rights are still an issue. We've realized that it is very expensive to address oil and mineral rights issues on a title. But as with the Leesburg High Ag Farm, you know, it seems like there are certain category of buyers to whom that's not really an issue. And
So how many barrels of oil are we pumping out a day?
Really?
I haven't seen the first one.
You gotta pay somebody about $60,000 to tell you zero.
To tell you
Zero?
zero. Yep. And to tell you it's too
That's the
small
expert
to
that you gotta
mine sand.
hire to be able to testify as based upon the zoning and the nature of the land, what the value of the oil and mineral rights are, which we've done for one piece of property in an eminent domain case, and they argued about it and said it had value, and the decision ultimately that it was zero was the value.
And the other restriction that was on some of them about the city limits of Leesburg, Steve consulted with Fred Morrison at Macklin, and Fred's interpretation was essentially that as long as those funds that were generated from that sale went to a project that was within the city limits of Leesburg, then that restriction essentially would be addressed. And for a clear title in case it ever became an issue in sometime in the future. You would basically put that in the deed that you were restricting those funds to a project within the city limits of Leesburg. If it ever came up and somebody did a big title search, then there would be a clear record of that. And I'm sure Scott can make sure that projects go to within the city limits of Leesburg. So our recommendation at this point on those southwest lands is basically that we move forward with the ones that we're going to sell without clearing the title. And we do the steps that we do need to take, which are to declare them surplus, to do an educational plant survey that says, that gives, DOE tells us that we can sell them, and then to actively put them on the market.
Which ones? Like, there's a
So
lot
it's
here.
we call them the southwest vacant lands.
Northwest.
So it's,
Kelly.
northwest, sorry,
Oh,
northwest.
okay, that makes a little more sense.
So it's basically the map numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
They're essentially in Fruitland Park, Lady Lake, and out there by the golf course.
Right. They're kind of, the value will vary. The only piece that I think probably is easily accessible and really has a value is a piece that we call the Cherry Lake Road piece. It's map number 6, and it's about 49 acres. It is directly on Cherry Lake Road. The Villages is on the other side, but it's not accessible from that side.
That's the only one that I would hold on to be very honest with you. And if nothing else, you may see growth, not, just like we saw with the 466, someone might be interested, but also that with the Villages comes the need for service people, which comes kids.
So you would, previous board did not recommend disposing of that property?
I'm saying I wouldn't either.
He's saying he would not
Okay, so
recommend
you
disposing
would
of it.
believe that we should hold on to it
That's my opinion. yes.
for a future school site, or just because you think the value is going to
Yes and
going
yes.
to go up?
Yes and yes.
Double yes.
Okay.
If we're saying City of Leesburg, but some of these say like Lady Lake, I saw Lady Lake. I
So
heard
they're
Mr. Johnson
actually-
say Fruitland Park. Go ahead.
They are actually located in like Lady Lake and Fruitland Park, but when they were deeded to
It
us,
was Leesburg.
it actually, no, it wasn't actually in Leesburg, but it said it was given to the Board of Public Instruction for the benefit of schools within the city limits of Leesburg. So at that time, we probably didn't, there may have been a school in Fruitland Park, but there wasn't actually any schools in like Lady Lake. Well, who knows, maybe there was. But I'll give you the quick summary of it. In the late 1940s, there was an ag teacher at Leesburg High School who actually got all these properties donated essentially to Leesburg High School, really, because they went out and the ag program went out and planted pine trees on it, and they were going to go back and maintain and then harvest those pine trees. And that was going to be, that fund was going to be given to Leesburg High School or to the student scholarships or something. So there was some plan that basically it would benefit Leesburg High School. And so I think that when they were donated, that was the purpose of that restriction, was that really it was intended for benefit to that.
So you don't know that, you said like the value of those different properties is to be determined as of yet, but if you go back to this plan and Beverly Shores is in 23, 24 fiscal year, if some of those dollars were relieved based on the sale of this land, would that, I
It
know
may
you have
move
Beverly
when-
Shores, but it could not have an impact on the order.
It
of the
couldn't
piece.
have an impact on the next following sales tax
Following,
project,
okay.
which would then,
I
it would
know, I know.
relieve that
I'm
need to
trying.
send sales tax money.
No, but you're spot on though.
Right, like
Yeah.
something.
No,
Because
exactly.
we have the 466A that we have
Right.
a contract on.
Yes.
And it's 240 days or something.
Well, that one doesn't have that restriction, so.
No, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying the money's not rolling in immediately.
Right.
But certainly strategically, if in 2007, the boards decided to sell these property, and I guess we waited 12 years to reconfirm that in case we were just thinking about it.
We don't want to wait 12 more years, that's clear about that, right?
Yeah, I'd like to see a strategy where we don't, in 12 years, another board's not talking about it.
Right,
I
right,
would too.
right.
I mean, so is it conceivable that we would get together brokers and let some brokers bid on the option to represent us and actively go out and find people?
We would have.
Just put
to
it up
go-
for sale, put the sign, doesn't do
Yeah.
anything.
We would, generally, the idea was that we would put it out and let the brokers know that it was available. So if they had a client who was interested, they could come to us. If we'd like to get a broker to represent us, then we have to go through the procurement process and basically have them do a RFP or an RFQ. And,
I don't
and we
plan to
can
see us do
certainly do
that, to
that.
be honest with you. I'd like to see someone who's working in our interest, and rather than just put it in an MLS, let's find somebody that's really gonna work it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because then
I like
what
that idea.
impact could it have then on our
Right.
future plans and?
sure.
Yeah, if you dump
We
some of these
actually had a
properties-
broker at one point, well, actually probably about 12 years ago. But
They
that's
did a
still.
great job.
Yeah, let's get a,
I understand that
can
some of these
absolutely look at doing that
parcels are
again.
only gonna have value to
Right.
certain people, like who live next door to the parcel or something, I mean,
But that's where you need someone, not for anything, but when Jim Miller brought the 466 to us, that's somebody that's clued in to what's going on, and that if they know that neighbor A needs B, they're knocking on his door saying, hey, the school's got this property.
Right.
They're gonna get a commission for selling it, instead of us just putting a sign up.
oh, you won't get anything putting a sign up out on these pieces, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
I'm not
Good, we're all
sure
on the same page.
Anybody could see them. There's a few that I don't think have
Put it on
much of a
Facebook.
road access.
Put it on
But-
Facebook.
Okay, so we'll move forward with the ones that the board has already voted to dispose of. And I did not include the north part of the Leesburg High Ag Farm because we are actively working on a contract for that one.
Okay, so that's not on here.
That
That's
is
what I
not on
missed,
here.
yeah,
The south
okay.
part,
The south part is on here.
the
Right,
south part is the little triangle.
It is a little triangle.
3
Yeah.
acres.
That has a ton of value, not.
Well, it's 215,000, it says.
Huh?
It says it last appraised for 215,000.
Go look at it.
I know, but I'm just looking at 49 acres, was appraised for 570. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, right?
oh, was that
There's a couple in
before
there that I was like,
2008?
what?
Yeah.
I might be looking to
Anyway.
move.
Okay.
The other properties, the Lowndes property, my recommendation would be that we retain that site, just knowing that growth is coming up. That's the 110 acre plus or minus in Mineola. I would recommend that we hold on to it. The deed restriction that says it can't be used for anything other than a school
That's up
expires
in
in
November.
November. But I do still think that we should hold on to it until we have a better picture of development patterns in Mineola. And then
And
there
maybe
is
you'll get
actually,
some value back. Looks like they overpaid in '04.
yeah. It's probably
No,
close to about that same amount
Came back.
at this point, but,
A fella called me, and he was willing to go $50,000 an acre, which is like 5 million change. And I came back at 8.8, and he said, not right now.
Not right now.
There's our broker right there.
We're gonna need a contract with them.
No,
So just give me the cash. It's yours. No, it never came to the point of bringing it to the board, but I did get a phone call about it.
and the other, there's about half an acre that's, we've never actually really had this on the market, but, where the warehouse and grounds property is and the bus lot in Berries on US 19, the property actually goes to the west side of US 19. There's a little plus or minus half an acre on the other side. We don't use it for anything, it doesn't really serve any purpose.
I thought
and
there was an
so-
orange grove there. There was an orange grove there at one
Yeah,
time.
but I think our piece is like kind of a little bit, we don't do anything with it.
I know,
I
but
think
there's,
there's an orange grove surrounding our
and there was a
property.
house there too.
That's not on ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, give it to them, give it to those people. Goodwill.
So basically, I don't really see any reason to hold on to it.
Not a half acre.
Yeah.
I'm sure we are.
We had talked to the DOT to see, they had to talk to us about maybe using it for a retention pond for COVID-19, then they decided they weren't interested. So it's like, okay,
Well, I know at one time we were looking at the old prison,
Mm-hmm.
utilizing that for warehouse and grounds,
right.
or actually
Yeah,
grounds.
they actually wanted to hold on to that one. We had talked to them about
It's got a lot of
that,
dirt
and,
in it right now.
Yeah, I think they're gonna use it as a staging site, and, didn't wanna give it to us, so. We offered to do a trade, they weren't interested. So, so it sounds like we will move forward on everything that we had previously said that we were gonna dispose of. And, hopefully we'll be back to you with some items on that soon. So that's, I think, all I had.
What's purple and orange?
So there's headings on the pages. The orange is, property that's either leased to or from others. So you see like page 6 is properties that we are leasing to others. Page 5 is property we are leasing from others. So that was the, parking lot from St. Thomas Episcopal at Eustis Elementary. We are not leasing that from them any longer, but I left it on there just for
Oh, we're
one
not?
more time.
We're not leasing?
No. We are creating our own parking lot on the property that we own. So,
Good job.
And
Because
then,
how much, this, do you know how much we were paying annually,
the last lease was, I think, $8,000.
a year? Okay.
So we are not doing that anymore. The other two are baseball fields. The purple is properties that developers, we have agreements with developers, that if their development comes to fruition, they will either give or we have the opportunity to buy from them.
What's going on with the Eustis baseball fields? I thought they weren't, I thought the lease was out or something.
We're not, it says it on there. From what
Yeah,
I
it does
looked
say
at,
lease
says it's
ends.
still- Yeah. It's done.
But it says active.
It's active. If
Oh,
you
okay.
find the lease, it's expired.
So should that one be not on here?
We could take that off, yeah.
Or say
Or I can
not
make it
active.
inactive.
Not active.
Make it
Put another
inactive.
color.
Yeah.
I think it's a stretch to say Altoona's leasing, because they don't pay anything. Dollar.
$1. Altoona Fire Station too.
Yeah, and that, I don't think they occupy that building anymore, but the lease is still
$1
in
a
effect.
year for them too.
They haven't terminated.
We are generous with Altoona. Of course. It's Altoona.
But that's the old fire station.
That is the old fire station.
You're gonna get some
Yeah,
emails.
that lease is- They haven't terminated, the county hasn't terminated the lease, so it's still active. It does expire, I think, in the next, like, year or two.
It says October 13th of 20.
Holy cow.
Okay.
Amazing. See ya.
Any other questions from me?
I think that's all we have for you. Aren't you lucky? All right. Does anyone need a break before we move forward?
How long are you gonna be, Chuck? Okay, I got 15 minutes left on my kidneys, can you do it?
With eyes. His presentation doubled to what we had before.
Right.
That's only because
Saying we should take a bio break.
Yeah, take a break, please.
you want to take a break, really?
Yeah, seriously.
All right.
I mean,
5, 10 minutes?
5.
5?
That's right. Make sure it gets done.
We'll resume with our budget workshop presentation.
This is our first real budget workshop where we're actually going through a budget this year. We've discussed earlier some of the items that lead up to this, including the calculation comparison of last year's calculation to the appropriation at the beginning of the year. So before we get started, is not the right one. Sorry. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about the timeline for this current year. First thing that needs to happen before you really start the budget process is you end the Florida legislative session. The sessions by statute or by constitution is 60 days after the first Tuesday, after the first Monday in March. And so this year the session ended May the 3rd, 2019. The next item that happens that's important to our budget is the Lake County property appraiser certifies the school taxable value. And he has done that. He has until July 1st, but we received that valuation on June the 28th, 2019. And when he sends that valuation to us, he also sends that valuation to the State Department of Revenue, who forwards it to the Department of Education. And then the Commissioner of Education will have to certify the millages that go along with that change in that taxable value. And I will say that it did have a slight increase over what they projected for the conference report. So we'll see a little bit of extra revenue, local revenue for our 0.75 mil and our 1.5 mil. But the millage that we use for our required local effort will not bring us any more additional revenue because they will just lower that millage down a little bit to make up for that difference. Commissioner of Education certifies it not later than 2 working days before July the 19th. So we think in the next week and a half, we will have something from the commissioner with the final millage rate that we will use. And then we will prepare the tentative budget for advertising within 29 days of certifying the taxable value. So July the 26th, 2019, we will be presenting the tentative budget. We'll have a public hearing we'll advertise on the 26th. We'll have a public hearing on July the 29th to approve the tentative millages and budget. And then the trim notices are mailed out to the property owners by the property appraiser so that they will know how much their taxes are going to increase or decrease according to that notification. And then the final public hearing to adopt the final millages and budget will be September 9th, 2019. So that gives us a couple of different budgets, and I felt like it was important that we just kind of recap over some of the differences between the budgets we talk about. So today we're going to be talking about the preliminary budget. This is based on the preliminary information that we had. It's based on the first calculation or the legislative conference report, the estimated beginning fund balance, the approved staffing plans that the board recently approved in previous meetings, school allocations, and departmental budget request. At this point in time, we just have the request in there. We haven't had the opportunity to go through each one of the requests and really question any additions or look at anything that might need to be adjusted. So we'll we'll typically sit down with them if we see any kind of significant changes, meaning increases, to look at. We'll also look at the current year expenditures to those budget requests to make sure that their budget requests are in line with what their current spending trend. So then after that, on July the 29th, we'll present to you for approval for advertising, and on July 29th, we'll have the tentative budget for approval. It's based on the second calculation. That second calculation mainly is to change in the required local effort that the commissioner certifies and any other updates that may be necessary. We'll have the certified required local millage rate at that time, revised estimated beginning fund balance, and adjusted school allocations or departmental budgets, and those will be those budgets that we've had an opportunity to go through and make any necessary changes that we see. And then the final budget will be September 9th, 2019. Again, it's based on the second calculation, the actual beginning fund balance. By then, we would have closed our current 2019 year, so we'll have a firm actual beginning fund balance, no longer an estimate, and then the adjusted and school department budgets as necessary. So this is kind of very similar to the ad that we do when we do the tentative budget in the newspaper, when we advertise for that, and we set it up to look very similar to that. So if we were going to run that ad today, this is what it would look like. You can see that it's column is the general fund, the special revenue fund, which includes food service and all of your other special revenue funds, debt service, capital projects, enterprise fund, and internal service fund. So you can Just looking at it preliminarily, you can see that the federal, the state sources, local sources, and we go in more detail after this page, looking at comparisons from year to year, so you can see what's increased and what's decreased. But a couple of things that I did want to note about this is the preliminary budget, and you can see that last year's fund balance, or the beginning fund balance, is very similar to the last year's, or the previous year fund balance. So we did not see any, at this point in time, any increase in our fund balance in the last year. No major decreases, no major increases. So we're still looking at barely over that 3% mark at this point in time. And then what we've done is we've added all of our staffing, we've added all of our expense. We didn't add any additional funds for raises at this point in time. So right now it's current salary levels without adding anything additional. We will go back and revise that, obviously, when we're looking at our budgets to see what we can do. And then the ending fund balance. And as you can see right now, the ending fund balance is very close, actually slightly less than the beginning fund balance. So right now, if that budget played out and there were no other changes, our fund balance would actually slightly decrease throughout the year instead of increase. In the last year, we had about $16 million, a little over $16 million of lapse built into our budget. That's where we budget 100%, but we know that we're not going to use 100%. So we back down a percentage of what we think that we won't need because we don't have 100% of our people here at all times or all of our expense. This budget is about $15 million, so it actually has a little bit better lapse picture in it, but I thought it was important to discuss that so that you kind of have an idea of how much lapse we have built in the budgets.
What is the major driver to us getting to where the board wants you to be on the fund balance?
Well, it could be a number of things. It could be, increase in revenues obviously is out of the question. Then the second thing would be growth or reduced expenditures. It's just that simple. We could go through and look at where to make some major changes to expenditures. And I think it would definitely have a long conversation with the board because, it would be cuts at some point in time, at some place. So we definitely can have that conversation.
We definitely need to have that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Where
Absolutely.
do we need to be? What is the number that you're shooting for? 4% or more, but what are you, is it just strict 4% of which one of our funds? The general fund, or are you talking about?
The general
entire-
fund. The general fund is the one that they measure as your operating fund. The other funds, like your special revenue funds, our food service fund has a tremendous fund balance in it at this
Right.
point in time. Our other special revenues by design, your revenues always equal your expenditure, so there is no fund balance for your special revenue funds for like your Title Is and your other federal projects. Our debt service fund, we can only put a balance in there that's legally required by law for us. And then capital projects is our
Can you
capital project.
clarify, you just said that the special revenue doesn't have a fund balance. What's the $12 million number then?
That's the food service. There's the food service and the other.
Thank
The others don't have a fund balance, but the food service does.
And the 13.2 is decreased from last year.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So we're talking 4% of the 382 million? 4% of which number exactly?
Right.
Well, you would
That's what I was wondering.
you would take the
Actually,
382 and you would subtract the fund balance net position beginning, and you would subtract the transfers in.
Okay, so I got to do a little math there.
So that total source is at 356,584 would be the number that you would want 3%.
Oh, okay, total sources. So 4% of that.
Yeah, the board policy is 4%.
Right.
Where's total sources?
The state
Here?
limit is 3%. Below 3%, then we're supposed to notify the commission.
So looking at the proposed budget here, I know we got a long time between now and the end of that fiscal year, but do we have reduced expenditures to get to the moving in the positive direction?
If we wanted to get to the 4%, yes, you're going to have to.
So those are those already built in or no? So we would have to figure out where to trim back.
Yes. This budget that we have right now, the preliminary budget, it does not get us, it keeps us at the 3%.
Keeps us where we are now,
where we
like
are
right
now.
at 3%.
Correct. So if we want to go to a 4%, then we're going to have to look at making.
Okay,
cuts.
and go back and say that line about, you said something about salaries or increases not budgeted.
Yeah, there was, when we were developing this budget, we did not add any additional anticipation of salary increases to come up with this budget at this point in time. So if we want to do salary increases, then we're going to also have to add the expenditures for that too, which is kind of contrary to what you're saying when you're saying.
I understand that.
And I don't mean to oversimplify that. You're right. You would want to, you'd have to cut here and then do pay raises here, somewhere in the middle. And I completely realize when.
But in real strategic planning, we know that we want to offer raises.
Yes, sir.
And so I would expect that, I want to be able to see that in here and see what that looks like. And then see if there's areas, or if we end up with, which I know there is, this huge fund balance in food service, is there a way that food service can carry more of their weight? And that would be a revenue source coming into us, right?
Yes, and John probably can speak in more detail. We've had some conversations about offsetting some of the cost of the custodial that's provided by the district, the general fund, for a lot of those food service activities. But I think considering the amount of time and how it would be documented, it would be about $500,000. So $500,000 is nice and a very good step in the right direction, but we couldn't hang a hat on a 1% raise with $500,000. We would definitely need to find other places to find the revenues.
But I'm of the opinion that we need to at least have something in our mind so that we're not looking at numbers that aren't going to fly anyway.
I understand.
But I also think that when we were in jeopardy, when the superintendent first came on board and you came on board, and the fund balance was really in jeopardy, that I thought it was a clear message that we were going to get that fund balance up. And so at least, not overnight, but at least, again, a plan to get there. So the fact that it decreased is a little bit disappointing to me.
And these are preliminary, so
I get
we
it.
may
No,
not,
no, no.
we may not. end
And
up
I'm preliminary complaining.
It's at 3.7% too.
3.7?
That's what I got, is 3.7%. I just did it quick.
Right, but you have to understand that there are things in the fund balance that are restricted. And the 3% that the state uses is the unrestricted portion. So that
So
number.
it's not even that whole amount.
Right,
that's shown
because
there.
it's like inventories, you can't count the inventories because you can't pay wages with inventory. You can't go pull pencils off the shelf and hand the teachers.
Okay,
and say, "Here's
so,
your-"
So do we see the unrestricted fund balance on here somewhere?
That's not listed on there, no, sir.
okay, so what were we at last year? What percentage? I just want to be really clear, because
We
I was half listening.
We have
I'm
been
sorry.
very close to 3% for the last two.
And this year, we're still, we have not increased our percentage by any.
And one of the major determinations in that list last year was the cost of insurance going up.
I was just gonna ask that, like, when you look at the major, there's like a $10 million increase just in the insurance line, or the employee benefits line. Is that what I know we've had that conversation, we have a new broker, but,
Yes.
okay.
And we've been proactive, and the board's been proactive already. We've already made some changes in the upcoming year, but they're slow to take effect, and it's slow to see the changes. And really, the hope there was not so much to save money, it was to keep the 8-9% increases every year from happening,
Right.
because that's where all of our money's been going, obviously.
All goes.
And I'd just like to remind the board that one of the things that was also a priority last year was salary increases. And so we gave over $5 million of that in salary increases last year. And it was either you build your fund balance or we give salary increases. We couldn't do both. And the board opted to go with salary increases. So I just want to remind you that that's where that money went last year.
Okay, there was also a structural imbalance last year between the capital and the capital shift to general. Did we correct any of that?
I don't understand what a structural.
You said there was like
Or we were transferring too many maintenance dollars over to make the operating budget work, to maintain the 3%.
Well, yeah, and that's not a structural imbalance, I would say, or you a term like that. That's
I don't
just-
know what the correct
That's
term
been the
is.
trend. The trend has been, ever since 2010, when the Florida legislators opened up some of the operational expense that could be transferred to those funds. And so ideally, because that fund also lost from 2 mils to 1.5 mil, that's $90 million in the last $110 million in the last 10 years that we've lost in revenue. So the revenue in the capital fund's being cut, and we're also shifting more of that funding into the general fund now. So what happens long-term is your capital stuff starts to.
okay, so we were shifting 14, if I remember, million.
Right, I think in 2017 it was over 14. This year, we're looking at around 12 and a half, but part of that
I thought the goal was to
is-
get more closer down to 5 or 6.
Well, right now, this budget still maximizes that. So whatever we think we can transfer, we have budgeted to transfer at this point in time. Because legally, you're only allowed to transfer certain types of items. So if we don't spend money in the general fund on those types of items, or if we cut those, then we can't transfer as much as we have in the past.
Okay, so but when 2 years ago Diane came, it was like an emergency, right? And so teachers didn't get raises, and we haven't fixed this at all. I thought that was the goal. I thought that was our,
Well, and like we just discussed, there was $5 million added last year for salaries, which is reoccurring. And then this year, we knew that we had, and last year, we had a late $4 million adjustment for insurance. It wasn't all general fund, but it was substantial to the general fund. And then this year, we had to adjust for that mid-year to make sure that we didn't get to the end of the year and have the same thing happen again. So what we're seeing is, we're seeing our salaries cost going up, and we also saw the insurance, which we didn't quite anticipate. It went up significantly last year. So there's a balance and a counterbalance. There's been some cuts made into the general fund, and there's been some transfers made to help support the general fund, but there's also been other expenses that have eaten up away at that.
So I noticed a change in the, this goes back to the capital plan, but on the page where it talked about our expenses, you put maintenance projects transfer, maintenance transfer to general fund, portable lease transfer. So those are the dollars that we're transferring from capital to general that are allowable. So I noticed those were still there too, and now that you're putting them out there where they're legal to do.
So thinking back about the salary increases, we also simultaneously reduced the number of teaching allocations, didn't we? I thought that would offset it.
It wasn't all teaching. It was other areas too. There were other
Right.
departments
I know
that
we
were cut.
restructured the whole district and that saved more than $1 million. That was one piece of it. But I thought the most sizable portion came from the reduction of allocations. We were over allocated out there.
right,
But we gave some of that back,
We did.
as they needed them. If they proved that they needed them, we gave them back. Some, not all, but some.
Here's all I know, is that we're at 3% roughly, right?
Yes, sir.
That we don't have any increases budgeted.
Not in this budget, no, sir.
So we're going to be below 3% if we try and give raises, which we don't want to do. So now you need to figure it out.
I guess that means we got to cut some expenditures, right?
right.
So we got to cut some costs.
So
That's
where
the
do we,
story.
where can we cut? Start giving me a red pen.
Well, with what we have approved so far with the staffing plan, is that on hold until this budget is finalized, or is it going to be?
This includes all of the staffing plan changes that were approved.
I know, but I'm just saying, if we don't have the money to do all of the changes of the staffing plan, are they on frozen right now until we decide this, or are we already hiring?
I believe we're already hired.
So that, I guess that goes back to my fear that now all those funds will be allocated and locked in, and then there won't be something
Right,
available.
because things get trickled in for us.
That's right.
So we see it in trickles.
So, I mean, do we need to talk about putting a pause on that until we figure out how much money we need to?
Yes.
Again, this goes back to a 6-year discussion, a 4-year discussion, and probably a 2-year discussion, 3-year discussion, that we never see it all in one lump.
Right.
That we approve things out of sequence, and it seems like until we have how much money we have, and then ultimately what the board's objectives are, that we're approving things out of order. Just seems to me.
And I will agree with that. That's been my same observation. And it is difficult. It makes it difficult for you. It makes it difficult for me. We go through the process. We have approvals at the board level for our departments, and then the budget numbers come in, and then it's okay. Well, what we just approved just ate up most of the additional funding provided by the state. So,
Right.
I understand.
The other, to caveat on what Mr. Mathias was talking about earlier with food service, what are we charging them other than the custodial? Are they being charged for like electrical, I'm talking about repairs, not the electric and the gas that they're utilizing on the utilities, but when we send repairmen in to do work, are they being charged for that? Or is that saying that that's some of the building maintenance that we're responsible for?
I can't answer that question. That's.
We ought to be
I'm not
charging for
in the-
electricity and the gas.
That we are.
How big
It's
is their
done by
fund balance right now?
percentage.
Food service, or is it still like 50%?
It's, have it, yes, it actually increased in the current year.
Again?
Well, yeah, because now we're serving more meals at a higher rate to be reimbursed
So,
from.
fund balance July 1st, through 18-19 was 12.2 million, 12.3 million.
Okay.
Now it's 13.7, 13.8.
We gotta get some of that
They
money.
need to loan some cash to us.
Yeah.
I'm afraid,
They're our cousins.
Now, we did just do an audit of them.
yes, the internal auditor has recently done an audit of them.
But that's only on expenditures and things of that nature there, but not as far as other things. But something I just need, so the public is aware of, because there is a line item in here under this, it says school board, and then it has $1,057,000. Please, you would tell them that that is not our salary.
It's not.
That number includes your legal services and your legal fees. It also includes your audit fees. There are certain things by statute that are included in that number, and it's not just your salary.
So
But
it
people
increased.
see that and they're like, boy, the school board, that's what I want to run. Yeah, okay.
But isn't there an increase of like $300,000
That's what I put on here.
to that line?
$300,000.
Yeah.
Was it law? I was-
What's driving that significant increase?
And you're talking about the,
It's on
School
it's on the
board.
preliminary budget comparison by function page. There was no page number, so I couldn't.
I apologize for that.
No, it's preliminary budget comparison by function.
By function?
Huh? Then if
Let me
you go
see.
to board, yeah, we're at 1 million and we were at 700,000. So I had that written down too, like who's getting that extra 300 grand?
A lot of that up
Not
and
it.
down variations that you see have to do with what
The lawyer
cycle we're
fees.
in with the Auditor General.
Auditor General.
It's not just all that, because the audit fee is not that significant, but I can pull more detail and see exactly.
Yeah, but the auditor general doesn't cost 300,000. That's like
They
75,
don't charge
right?
us anything, but there's usually an overlay of the auditor that's leaving and the payment that goes out, and then they do preliminary work before they get started. So the audit cycles don't run July 1 to June 30th. They run a little bit before and a little bit after, but the year that the AG's here, we don't pay the Auditor General's office. We only pay the external when they're here for those 2 years.
One of the things that I think we used to get with the budgets in the notebooks was a more detailed breakdown of how each of those numbers were arrived at.
Oh, each page. It's like a
Yeah,
section.
and said everything that.
Each department.
That's right. We got that for each department.
And that's coming.
That's coming.
That is coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause
This is,
that
because
would-
we're running about 3 weeks earlier than we were running last year. So again, this is preliminary. We're pulling it together and looking, so.
Okay. Is this
So thinking of, I guess we've got tentative approval of the budget at the end of this month, right? You said July 29th?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So we'll get those ahead of time. And do we have another workshop between now and then to talk more in detail about that stuff? Or do we then come meet individually to?
Between now and the 29th. We
Right.
don't have one scheduled, but if you'd like one, we will try to accommodate that any way we can. Now, the board meeting, we'll request the approval of the advertisement of the tentative at the next board meeting, which is a week from now. Okay? So you'll have the tentative with the second calc and the correct millage numbers in it at that point in time.
So I guess if I'm thinking about these priorities of increasing the fund balance and also making money available for salary increases, it seems like we're going to have to dive into that and some conversation to figure out what's most important. You know, I guess we can have anything we want, right? But
But
can't
not
have
everything.
everything. So, I mean, I guess my fear is if we wait till September to have that conversation, well, the year's already started, so we're locked in on everything just about.
Just a couple of comments to make. When you're doing your tentative budget, what you're approving is you're approving the advertisement of your millage. You also have to present a budget. A lot of what you guys are talking about and what you're asking about will have impact on the budget, will make changes, but it won't necessarily change what legally you have to advertise and what you put in your budget. budget.
For the
You're
mills.
not gonna have an ability to change your required buccal effort.
Right.
You're not going to change, I'm assuming the board's not gonna change the 0.75 or the 1.5 or the.
Right, right.
Or the 0.748 or whatever.
I guess how all that money is spent is my question.
Right, it's how it's spent. So you have plenty of time to make conversations about how you want that money spent between, actually, once it is advertised. Now, remember, we talked about, you have a $15 million lapse built into this budget already. So if we were going to budget 100% of salaries and 100% of expected expenses, it would be even higher than that. So, you know, we have plenty of working room between now and the end of the budget season to get this right.
But what we don't have is, because you're in collective bargaining right now,
Right.
right? With the SEIU and the LCEA. So
We don't want to wait.
how does he know what to do?
We
Because
don't
right
know
now-
what to do.
Right now, he has nothing, so I'm sure he's probably already told you guys that, like, we don't have any money, again, and y'all are saying, yeah, you do, so blah, blah, blah. But how do we get to a point where,
We direct
He's
them.
gonna have more money than what's in his wallet, right?
Well, and to do it in a timely manner, because we're obviously going to start the year without a contract. So,
again,
Again, right,
Couple things. One, it's way too late. By the time we get the numbers from the state.
right.
It's way too late for us to really know what we can do in a short period of time to approve a contract. There are a lot of contracts that are being approved throughout the state, but those have a better financial fund balance than what we have. So when you have that short fund balance like that, you have to be a lot more cautious. You have to take a lot more time before you make those decisions.
which is exactly why, when I came on the board and other board members, we were focused on reducing the debt, and we're seeing the benefit of that.
Right.
Now we need to focus on getting that fund balance up so that we then can put you, I guess, we're just helping you, that's all, I think. But, you know what I'm saying?
Correct.
That to ignore the fund balance is, I think, a mistake. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
No, I'd like to just say it's not being ignored. I think you have some competing needs, and we've talked about that before,
That was too rude. I mean, I get that.
yeah. So we've just got to decide of those competing needs, what is going to be our priority focus from year to year, because you don't want to keep incurring salary increases for monies unless you know that you've got those annually reoccurring. So if you go in and cut out a bunch of programs, that's not going to do you any good because it's a one-year fix.
Right.
Will help you with the fund balance for 1 year, but it's not going to help you long-term in sustaining the increased cost of salaries. I think where we've been really proactive is kind of looking at insurance, knowing that
Right.
that is our major contributor to this huge expense, and how do we, over the long haul, reduce the impact of insurance both on the employees and on the board, so that you don't have to keep the monies that we had, like our compression adjustment, all of that got eaten up with the insurance increases. And so fix the cause of the problem so that then you can start building upon your solution. And right now, we're just now getting to the point where hopefully we can look at a long-term solution for the insurance issue.
Which I will
That's right.
say,
So we
that
have to
the
fix
insurance
insurance.
issue for the school board is bad as far as what we look at is that, how much it was a difference. But in other areas, it's more because we have our own in-house care, clinics and things of that nature there that the employees can go to. So that reduces some of our cost. Otherwise, it would be even greater than what it is. So-
The insurance thing is part that for just a second, because when we voted and changed the broker guy, I thought we were going to save money. And all of a sudden, it went goofy. So I'd like to know more about that later. But also being fair, that if there are other strategies, and I'm kind of fixated right now on that 13 million sitting in the fund balance, that how then legally or whatever can we get access to those dollars that are just sitting there?
It's not
You're
easy.
referring to the food service.
That's 100% what I'm talking about, is food service.
Yeah.
We
And
have
if you
looked at-
move food service, like on the schools, is food service buying the equipment outside of can food service buy the equipment for the Four Corners School for the cafeteria? Are they doing that, John? Do you know?
No, yes and no. What it is we're transferring equipment from the previous site that was purchased within, I think, about 5 years, 3 to 5 years, that's usable, that's adaptive to the expanded cooking line.
No, wait. I'm talking about the new Four Corners.
The Four
School.
Corners.
Four
I was
Corners
like,
is-
what?
I'm like, we don't have nothing down there.
We're going to,
You're at Cypress Ridge.
Cypress Ridge.
Yes.
Like I said,
Yeah, you don't need any help.
No, there's, as a new school, they are not. They're
But-
not obligated to do so.
That they're not obligated to do so. You're talking about food service?
That's
But
correct.
can we tell them to do
Wait,
so?
they're not obligated, but they can.
That's a million
Can
right
they?
there. Just on there. I mean,
My understanding is no. That's the interpretation that I understand from the Department of Agriculture for building a new school. No.
That has to be funded differently because it is a new school. Because when we were doing Curtright over there, the kitchen renovation, there was a talk at one time, why are we even considering renovating this kitchen? Why not just build a new building outside this kitchen and make it, and make this now the serve-in area? They can't build a new building, but they can renovate. So they can't buy new equipment to go into a building that's being built brand new, from what I took, but they could go into a building that's existing and renovate and buy all new equipment.
Which they do
Tired of all
frequently,
the
by
hand-
the way, in our schools.
What I'd like to see us do is think out of the box and perhaps a bit gray, and that we figure this out. That's what I'd
Yes.
like to see. So,
Yeah, 'cause
I
there's
will say that years
$12 million
ago, this
just sitting
conversation
there.
came up about the money they had in reserve, which was actually $2 million at that time. And what they did, they outsourced food service as far as who ran it for a year, and then they got that money. Somehow, that money came into the general fund to do the roof repairs. And then the next year, we went back to having a supervisor or director of food service. I don't want to even think about that.
yeah, I wouldn't want to do
But that's how it was done one time before. But
They
that's,
got rid of the permanent person.
that. Anyway, all I know is there's $13 million sitting there. That's all I'm telling you. And it seems pretty easy
well,
out
also,
of the box to capture, or just freaking steal it.
correct me if I'm wrong on this, though, if they have a certain time frame
Right.
that they can use this money, and if they don't, then it has to be returned to the federal funding?
There is some language along those lines. It's not returned. They have to adjust the cost of their food, which right now.
Okay, which would be
their food
reduced, so
prices.
it's free
There is
right
their
now.
food prices right now, so I don't know what the next step would be. I
They're in
have
filet
heard,
mignon.
well, what I've heard though is that they will come in and they'll tell you that you need to run you need to raise.
But you need to buy better food,
That's right.
which I happen to think we need to do
Well,
that
I
also. by
agree
the
with
way.
that.
Ditto.
I was
that
going to
doesn't capture
suggest
that
that
there's
later
But I
tonight.
mean,
Well, at
but-
least it's being
Pay
used.
teachers for lunch duty. We
Yeah.
need to do something like that.
Anyway,
Huh?
I think we're beating this to death. So anyway, go ahead and tell us what else we can't do right now.
All right, but
Is there any other pots of
But-
money that we can't get to? I guess there's a lot of other pots of money we can't get to.
There was a couple of questions I had, but I guess my question goes back to Mark's, is that there was a couple of items, maybe if we had that, in that sheet that was a little bit more delved down into, or if we have our individual meetings, that we can go through and talk about those things in the budget, or do you want to do that? Or are we going to schedule a meeting where we can do that? What's going to happen next?
I'll serve at the pleasure of the board, whatever format you prefer, I'll be happy to.
I think meeting together, that way we all hear what other concerns are, is a better to me. But, I mean, if you want to meet individually, that's up to you, but
That's fine.
I think when we air it out like this, we all hear what other concerns are, and maybe someone else has a little bit more insight on something else that can add to it. And
Well, and
then
I would-
Scott give us the solution.
And I would hate to, like my questions in here, and then they would be easily answered with the notebook, or not. I don't know. What do you know?
Right.
What's that notebook?
I missed the notebook. I do
You know,
miss the notebook.
Staff
Like this.
obviously knows several ways to cut. It's just, with every cut, there's a pain, obviously. I mean, our class sizes are very low in our district. When you look at our class sizes, when you look at the required amount that we have to have, they're very low. So we could raise our class sizes, and that would make a significant difference in our operation funding-wise, but it also have a significant impact on how we do our job.
But I thought you already did that, Superintendent.
To some degree.
In terms of the class size, and we did make reductions in allocations in areas where we knew we were over allocated. Where you're going to see the impact is really at our high schools and our middle schools with AP courses. That's where we have some very low class sizes. So you have to balance whether or not you want to eliminate those offerings for kids and reduce courses like that, where you have the low class sizes.
AP courses don't have a cap.
No, but
that's my understanding.
There's
I've
not
heard of
enough
AP
enrolled.
teachers
Yeah,
There's
with
not
like,
enough enrollment.
That's the problem. Like,
Okay.
since we have so many specialized, very specific AP courses, a course might not have 25 kids.
right,
who
but it can
want to
have
take-
35 is what I've heard also.
You can, but
They
then you have to
could.
consider whether that's the best approach educationally.
So
But-
that's one area that we've really talked about. Do we want to look at those types of programs and offerings? And right now, we haven't taken it that deep because we want to offer this wide variety of courses for kids because that's good for kids. But that's certainly something that we can look at. In terms of our elementary class sizes, our core classes, I don't know that they're excessively low. I think they're probably right on in most cases. There might be a few, but it's one of those where you start combining classes and then the impact on kids again, then your class sizes get too large. And so we monitor those closely. And where we could, we eliminated about 75 allocations, which was where we got part of the monies from for last year. We have had to add some of those back. Keep in mind that we are remaining, we now are we dropped to 50th, 52nd in fund, or 60th? 62nd, sorry, yes, in funding out of 67. But we had the second highest increase in enrollment of any district in the state of Florida over this past year. So, the two don't mix. You have increase in student enrollment, but your funding's gone down. And so those are just, that is that fight in Tallahassee that we've got to continue to really work with our legislative delegation and our lobbyists.
But we also have a reality on the ground that we've been fighting this fight.
Yeah,
And
When
that-
we're losing.
and we're losing, so accept that.
right.
And then I don't know, I tend to lean towards doing what's good for kids, but
But-
maybe we just can't do everything.
But let me ask you this, because in the today's world, I don't know why we approve these pass positions. We have this in-school suspension type situation that we're going to offer for kids, which is a great thing. But we had another conversation recently about having kids take classes online and whether or not they're sent home to take these classes online. If we're going to pull back enrollment of AP courses, our AP course enrollment are generally kids that can manage
And we talked
taking an
about that.
online
You're right.
course. So can they not go sit in this same with a computer? I don't know that would be a challenge, and they have to take online classes in college. That's a college and career readiness move. So it's not taking these programs away. It's giving students an alternative. Not saying you can't go to that school, they don't offer it, but if you want to take this AP course, you're going to take it online during second period, and you're going to go to this room to be on the computer, or maybe we designate a different room. I don't, if you don't want to put them with the past kids, but it seems like with the online environment that we have available already, that would be an easy remedy if it's going to.
Don't-
And you're
don't we do
right.
that
Ask Mr.
already?
Dodd, though, about his experiences. As he felt the impact of that decision a year ago when we looked at some of our middle school and looked at some foreign language offerings, and we moved to a virtual platform, and he as a parent has experienced that is not.
That's right. I've got two kids taking a virtual course, and I can tell you the quality of instruction from a virtual course from the live teacher does not compare. And if
From
my kids
language? Is this language?
and if my kids do not have, I'll tell you, I'm spending an hour a day with my kids right now teaching the content that's already there online because they wouldn't get it otherwise. And they're good students.
I agree with you, and I know we've had a conversation. I had the same conversation last year. We were considering doing Spanish 1 online, and I think languages are really difficult, especially for a middle school student. I have a very smart middle schooler myself too, and we dropped it because of sports. We were like, we don't have the time to invest in that. But we're talking about AP level high school students. We're not talking about, I guess we could be talking about language availability in middle school as well, but Jensen wasn't mature enough yet at 12, being a level 5 grade student, right? I get that, but our AP students, our students that are getting ready to go into high school or to college is able.
But at the same time, those AP classes are supposed to be college level courses.
Yeah.
At which point, I don't know.
Colleges are looking at ways to go online. I'm telling you guys right now, at the university level, a lot of our courses, we're having to relook through them and find the ones that will go online. And it's just the direction of the world we live in, unfortunately. I think being face-to-face has.
Yeah. Well,
Right, I just think that's a detriment. I think it would be better, in my just impression of understanding college. I think you guys had discussed college acceptance at one point, and it was important for a student who wanted to get into UF, let's say, to take the most courses, the most AP classes offered at that school. That was what colleges looked for in admissions. And so my thought is to pull back on actual offerings as opposed to offering poor offerings. So actually just say, no, we're not gonna have, I don't know which
Well,
one.
then my kid's at the smallest high school in the county, right?
Would
So
hurt the
she's not
most.
gonna go to Umatilla High School if that's the
Small
case,
school
because
disadvantage.
the small school disadvantage, right?
That's right.
We can't, that's not an option either, I don't think, because then we're gonna cut off a whole high school of students.
So I guess the other thing to consider is if we're then allowing kids to go, if we're making virtual just so accessible, then they're not sitting in our course. I mean, who's to say that they're going to take Lake virtual? Therefore, we might lose out on the FTE dollars of these kids sitting on our campus, right? So that's the
Unless we generate some kind of a smart, like similar to the, and this is way off the cuff, like we're just throwing ideas out here, I'm assuming at this point, but like, if you consider the in-school suspension piece, then we have somebody designated there, can we not have like an AP-generated person that's a high-level teacher that can have some of these kids in there to give assistance in various pieces? I mean, if it's the languages that we're talking about having acquisition to, or if it's,
I think
Science or.
yeah, right,
It goes well
right.
beyond the language. I think it's well deep beyond the languages and the availability of that. I mean, like, there's so many, when our AP passing percentage is already struggling,
Well, what about the ones that aren't struggling?
well,
The
like,
ones with the high pass rate, can we put those online and have them take
But
them
they have a
online?
high pass rate because they have a good teacher.
Maybe.
no, Spanish has got a high pass
you
rate
would
because
hope.
there's so
Totally
many
high
native
pass rate.
speakers.
Oh, you mean the courses themselves?
The course.
I'm gonna tell you, it sounds a
themselves.
lot better to raid food service than everything I'm hearing here.
Yes.
I think I know for where my kids are in this county, that online it has to be an option for them because they don't have the things available that the south end of the county does. So that's already something that we're doing. It's already something we're gonna have to make adjustments for. You know, I definitely wanna give those kids the benefit of an amazing teacher. But how do we look at diversifying the teacher's availability maybe for 2 of those AP preps rather than having 11 kids in one and 9 kids in another? Can we combine those 2 in flexible schedules? I don't know, but I just feel like there could be some pieces to work with there.
I guess the other piece that you have to look at here is the certification of these teachers, right? I mean, if you've got, let's say, this
That's
art
an issue
teacher doing
around.
the AP, you know, you got a couple different arts that are AP related. Maybe one class has a small number, the other class has a small number. They're 2 different courses. So if you free up that art teacher that one period, well, what are they going to teach the other? They're going to teach art still the other period, right? So I guess it's kind of complicated.
It's really complicated.
I don't know that it's our.
That's right.
I don't know that it
Paying
helps us get our
teachers for lunch
salary
duty, I'm
increases.
just gonna say. They get a $4,000 pay for covering lunch
How
duty.
many millions do we need to get the fund balance where it needs?
So 3% is about 13 million, so,
Well, it was a deficit of 2, right?
4%, so
Was the deficit to get to 3?
I figure it's about $3 million
back of the
or
screen.
4.
Oh, tell me.
Can
It'd be
I did have a
$3.5 million.
question.
Right.
Okay, well, that's your starting point, so, yeah,
Do 4%.
figure what you can cut for that.
That's to get it to 4%, right?
4% unrestricted.
Right, to go from a 3 to a 4.
That's just kind of what I'd like to see, personally, and include something that y'all think you're going to end up offering,
So that,
so that we know how much you're really short.
so the 15 million that you were talking about, that could go toward that? You were talking about we had 15 million that was just sitting out there.
That's what we're short already.
It's not even here, right, because we don't use it.
Next time, just say short.
I have a question for you. I don't know, we're like changing subjects or whatever, but on the preliminary budget summary, I believe it's page 3, but let me.
Yeah, I had a question on that
Okay,
one too.
preliminary budget summary, well, it says administrative technology services is $4,457,000, right? And it even says that total all funds, but then if you go to the preliminary budget comparison by function, the administrative technology services, 5 million. 24,000. From, there's 500,000. Boom. I'm just kidding. I just don't know what the discrepancy is.
Okay, I'll have to check on that. I think that's the math error in the functions, because there's also a negative number there, and we can't budget a negative.
I'm done. It's y'all's job to find the rest of it.
There's a $500,000
selling some land.
subtraction in the
Community
services.
services,
In the-
yeah.
Maybe it was just up and down on their spreadsheet. Okay.
369.
I don't even know where you're looking right now. My eyes are trying to see what you're.
So the total appropriations are the same, it's just something's messed up with the, and I apologize for that, but something's messed up in the spreadsheet on that formula at the bottom.
Right there, okay.
So, but the total amount is the correct amount, which is the 360.
I didn't find it, never mind. Oh, I'm not done, though.
You're
Don't
back.
worry.
I have a question on the preliminary comparison of
Preliminary
revenue.
comparison Okay, that's where I was going to. That's good. Preliminary comparison of revenue.
I wanted to ask about Medicaid. Is that the money that we're getting by having a person who is now
It's
paying
less
for
than
Medicaid?
last year. I was confused
Wait,
by that,
why is
too.
it less than last year? And then why is it that in 17, 18, and all the years before, there's money? Because I thought there was supposed to not be any money.
I was confused by that also.
Okay, so there's two types of Medicaid. There's the Medicaid administrative claiming, which we've always had for a number of years, and then there's the Medicaid direct claiming.
Okay,
So the direct claiming is you do a service and you file claim on that
and that's what
specific
we've
service.
implemented.
And that's what we've implemented.
Okay.
But at first, the number that was given was if it was fully implemented the first year. And as you have seen probably the last couple of months, we had a workshop, there was more of a rollout. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't something that just flipped the switch and there was $1 million. So that number that we're using now is more reality of the rollout versus just having it all come in at one time.
Where is that number? Is it that 455,000? That's like
I'd
half?
have to get the detail of it,
last
see which one, how much is the old and how much is the new.
Is this both administrative and direct? Is
Yes,
that
they do
number
both.
for Medicaid,
They're
is it
both the
combo?
same. Yeah, they're
So
both
why
the
was
same.
it higher in 2017, 18? I mean, those to me look like estimate numbers, but, because they're even.
In 17?
Yeah, those are.
Those are estimated numbers coming through from, so it's estimated 700, then 600, then 800. Then last year it was
So
moved
how
up
is it
to-
so much worse this year
Yeah.
if we're doing direct and administrative?
I'll have to look at it.
Okay.
And then my next question on top of that would be, when we do have the implementation of the billing, the direct Medicaid, what line item will we see increase or decrease, I guess, as a result of those additional funds?
It would be the 3202. It would be the Medicaid. That's
And
where it would go.
That's in the general fund, so that would be availability of something.
Correct.
Okay. Okay,
Wait, where's the 32? Oh, okay,
account
the account number, got it.
okay.
I'm taking notes, so I will definitely circle back with responses on those.
I was surprised we got national forest funds.
I was too.
Any questions? I can go through the presentation. I mean, the conversation's
rolling
great,
out.
so I don't want to interrupt the conversation.
No,
so.
go ahead.
You kind of lost the rhythm.
All right, go ahead.
ahead.
The continuation of the
I was
presentation.
thinking about having to stretch this thing out for a while, but now I don't know if I can get it all in.
Go ahead.
We haven't
Go ahead.
But I don't want to stop the conversation, so if you
No,
have
go ahead,
questions.
Go ahead.
Well, I've got questions, but I think they might just fall in line
It
with
might
the
be answered,
presentation.
yeah.
Well, and most of these are just general, and I can skip through most of it, because again, this is preliminary, but, what we've done here is the preliminary budget lined up with the original budget, so you can see the differences between what we currently have estimated for revenues and what we've estimated in the past. And you can
Are we
see the
starting on that
increase for
page?
you can see an increase for the FEFP, you can see an increase for the class size reduction. This is the district school taxes, tax redemptions. This is what we're estimating. You see a large increase in the 3411, which is district school taxes. That's obviously the increase from the FEFP, but it's also mainly the increase for the 0.75 millage that's budgeted in there.
Where was that? I'm sorry, I
That's at the
think I
top.
just got, I don't think I'm on the right page yet.
District school taxes,
This one, okay, district schools, got it.
you can see an increase there. This is showing it by object code for general fund, so you can see all the salaries, all the employee benefits, purchase services, energy services, materials and supplies, capital outlay and other expenses. Again, the increase in salaries are going to be the additional positions for growth mainly, and then the other departmental increases also. Same with the employee benefits. And then the purchase services, you see that increase there. That's mainly due to the increase in charter school payments that we're anticipating for next year. Not a large increase for energy services.
Wait, so where is that? The
Purchase
700?
services, no, that's the 300.
Oh, the 300, okay. So is that going to be a pass-through?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And do you have available like salaries, district salaries, other? You know, like, so like what is, I think we always ask how much is in the classroom. That's
Yeah,
essentially.
we can do that. We can break it out. We can break
Today.
that
Bill and I can talk about that today.
We can break that out by function for you.
Okay.
Is
think it's in
there an actual compared to budget?
Not in today's presentation.
Well, it doesn't show what's in the classroom, but it
We
shows.
can do that for,
It does. But that's not salaries, is it?
so this is just a recap of it. It's the federal, the revenues at the top and the bottom is instructional, or excuse me, the expenditures. So you can see overall. So, like, you know, instruction, you're seeing a $32 million increase in instruction, and that's in schools, or that could be the charter schools that's getting passed through, or any other thing that would have been added.
Could it be like the past teachers, those types of, it's all the new positions that we have
New
too?
positions,
Okay.
correct. Nurses wouldn't be in there, but anything that was a 5,000 function.
Which number is this?
The instruction, 5,000.
Oh,
And then
5X, sorry.
I was going to ask somebody about that. If you look at the, I got to find it now. May not be in the right spot. The admin technology services, there's another technology services, instruction-related technology, and then admin technology.
Correct.
There's a big discrepancy there. One's 5 million and one's 1 million. 1.4 million, 1.3 million, 4.
So the instruction-related technology is what they're doing at the schools for mainly the classroom support. The admin technology is going to be most of our computer systems, our ERPs,
Got it.
all of our networks and
Okay.
those kind of things, mainly Creed.
Just the networks, yeah, okay.
So this is special revenue food service, and again, they're anticipating an increase in revenue. And then they always correlate their expenditures with the revenue. So their fund balance is showing an increase of $1.5 million and a half dollars increase from last year to this year.
So the feds are doing good.
You can see this, they're showing an increase in salaries, employee benefits, purchase services, materials and supplies, capital outlay for equipment. So everybody's,
Is
They
there
don't
like,
look at their fund balance anymore.
I guess we sort of had this discussion already, but like, I know that, Mr. Dodd was, I'd rather get the money. Like, Matthias recommended, but like, can we have like overhauls of all of our food service stuff if we have such a giant?
They are doing that. You talking about equipment?
Well, I know we are
The
doing some
quality of the
equipment,
food.
but like, I feel like we should have brand-new cafeterias. Like, it's just-
Well, the thing is, they are overhauling equipment and replacing the equipment in the kitchens and things of that nature there. And then also they are, like at Astatula, Lady Lake, and the, one in your zone, Lost Lake. They went in there and renovated the kitchen to put in an extra freezer and things for whenever the storms happen, the hurricanes and things of that nature there to make
Oh,
it.
I remember that.
Okay. They changed out some of that. They are, like I say, changing out equipment. But I agree with what you're saying, but also mainly with what Mr. Matthias said. And he brought this up earlier in one of our meetings where the increase was only 17% from what it was last year. That then we having this kind of a fund balance, then maybe we need to look at, quit telling the managers that this food costs too much. We don't want to serve that to the kids, that we need to serve the kids some better food. So that we'll increase that 17%,
And
a
more
whole
will
lot
eat
more.
there. That's right. More
Yeah,
kids
you
will
want
eat it
more
if it's
money.
better food.
Then we start
Right.
siphoning it off.
But rather than sit there and say we can't order this because it costs too much, if we've got that too much of a fund balance in there every year, then we need to be feeding our kids better food.
Bingo.
So they need to diminish some of that food balance, or food balance, that fund balance to make it happen. So, If they need to go out and take some, and that's where physically they need to go out, not ask the managers, go out themselves and say, hey, what would you like to see here to eat? Now, if they say steak and potatoes, we know we can't do that.
Yeah, we got 13 million.
Apparently we can. We can have steak and lobster every day.
Nah, I think we got to be reasonable, but I mean, you know, things that the kitchen can prepare and put in there. We've went into cost savings by having things that were pre-cooked. Maybe we need to get away from some of that and go back to home-cooked. You know, so we need our kids to eat and give them a good balanced meal. So I would say that we need to concentrate on more of that rather than saying that we're not being cost effective. We are. If you got $12, $13 million in a fund balance, something's wrong.
Right. I mean, and we
Can
can
I ask a
actually
question?
afford to put some of
I
that
want to
kitchen
go back to the
equipment
budget.
back.
So in the numbers, you're going up about $600,000 in salaries in your preliminary budget?
Yes.
So is that then, if there's no increases calculated, is that increases in people, 600,000 in food service workers?
Can't be.
They're going to start paying towards some of the salaries of the custodians, about $500,000.
Oh,
Are
okay,
built
so
into
that's
that.
included in that.
Yes.
Oh,
So it's
okay,
included
thank
in
you.
So is that set now? I mean, is that like, they're gonna, like, or they are?
They're going to,
They're going to.
Okay.
not gonna, going to.
And I know, having talked with Tom, that they were looking at electrical, like you're gonna put in, he had told me that you were gonna put in, looking at.
Meters?
Mr. Carr, yes, and meters to test out to see if we could pay for some of the electricity.
They already do. They pay,
So we're paying based on square footage right now.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean, because you have to remember when you're looking at square footage, that square footage, especially in the kitchens, are a lot higher demand than like a normal classroom, because they're running
Yes, of
hoods,
course.
they're running ovens, they're running everything else. So if they're doing it just based on square footage, obviously they're not getting the correct demand in that. So
right.
there's been some conversations about getting some meters, MI meters, just to measure, to see how far off are the square footage computations versus an actual measurement.
Because they already did in some kitchens put in water meters,
Yes.
like at Sawgrass Bay and other places that
I think
nature
they're
there.
doing trial kitchens was what I was told.
So, yeah. Yeah, any way we can get some money back from that, I think that's what we need to be doing.
The next sheet is our, just recap of food service and comparison for revenues and the total cost.
I think you better move past food.
I'm trying to
Let us get out of food service.
out of food service.
I think we made our point about food service.
So this is special revenues and others. We take we take the information that we know, but some of these grants do not. We don't have the information on the grants yet. So some of the differences that you see may or may not actually be the grants, but any grants that we bring in after the fact, we still take them in front of the board. We still do the budget amendments to bring them in. So I just wanted to say that on the front end, that sometimes you see a lot of ups and downs in federal grants, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're seeing cuts to our grants or additional grants. It's timing is a lot.
So we have $1.7 million, I see, in a teacher, principal training and recruiting increase.
Right.
Implementation meeting?
I was wondering too, the teacher and principal training and recruiting
Comparison
went up
revenues.
1.5 million.
And it could just be that there's another grant in there this year that wasn't included in last year. So I'd have to look at the grant detail to see if that's the case. We do know our Title I did go up some. That's the main one that I'm aware of.
1.5
so.
million.
But I mean, that's double almost, well, it is actually more than double of what it was the year before, so.
So here's the expenditures, and with federal revenues, your expenditures and revenues have to match. So whatever you see in revenues, you're going to see in expenses too. So that's the comparison of special revenue and other for the preliminary budget. This is by function. This is debt service. This is the actual debt service needed for the upcoming year. You see our CONDS at the top, 873,000. And then there's other local sources of the interest, and then transfers in. The transfers in of debt service all comes from capital outlay funds. There's no general fund dollars used to fund debt service.
Okay.
This is just breaking it out in a little bit more detail and comparing it across the years. Impact fees and the county level. This is capital outlay funds. District capital outlay for the 1.5 mils, 35 million. The county school tax, which sales tax is 16.2, and then impact fees at 15 million. This is debt service again. Sorry, they got out of order. This is showing both debt service and capital outlay, but it's just showing your revenues rolled up, state sources, local sources, your transfers in, and then same with your capital, your local sources. I know that you guys are quite aware that the PICO funding hasn't been funded for a number of years for new construction, and they did not fund our PICO for maintenance this year.
Right.
Scott, also, on the impact fees, didn't that amount go down as far as per home, as far as the fee structure?
Yes.
Because I remember seeing an email to that effect.
Yes, and this budget was based on an estimate of everything staying the same, but we think that the growth in impact fees will offset the reduction. So we think right now, without any more idea of exactly how much is going to increase or decrease, we just left it consistent
Okay.
from last year. This is our elementary school-based budgets, and what we did, we listed school, we listed the unweighted FTE at 1920, and then the unweighted FTE at 1819, so you can see what we're projecting, increases or decreases in the FTE, and then the total school-based budget. So you can see the majority of the budgets at the school-based are allocated based on per-student basis. So that's the biggest increase or decrease in their budgets as their students going up.
And that's at the same rate per pupil?
In groups, so all the elementary schools will
Right.
get put very similar, all of the middles will get
And
funded.
so, in addition to the department detail, I think one of the other things that we've gotten in greater detail in previous years has been the previous year of the schools, to see how they spent their budget, or if they've got a lot left or nothing left.
Right. Well, is that the difference?
No,
No,
that shows the difference in last year's
but it
budget.
doesn't say what their ending balance
Oh,
was.
I
Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, I like that ending balance.
Yeah.
But the only thing is, what we've learned though, in the past though, that some principals kept back their
Right, they
their
banked it.
money and banked it for something that their project that they were trying to do.
Well, then we could always
They just need to
ask.
explain that, that's all.
Yeah.
We spoke
Right.
about that before, just
Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah,
We have one school, and I'm sorry, I forget the name of the school, but they're going to be redoing their basketball flooring, and they request year after year to roll that funding over, and we've been accommodating that, so.
Right, which is
they
totally
don't-
reasonable.
well, I know East Ridge Middle School did that either last year or year before last, and because of the project they were doing, I think Lake Mineola High did something similar.
And this is the middle schools, same idea there. We show the FTE going up or down, and then how it impacted their school-based budget. High schools. School staffing plan changes, and this is just a summary. In the back of your packet that I gave you today, there's more detail. You can see it by school. You can see the FTE going up, and you can see the detail of what types of positions are going up and down. But I couldn't get all of that on a nice presentation, so I just did a summary of the staffing plan changes.
So is this numbers of people?
Yes, so elementary, there's 10.9 more teacher units at elementary, 7.9 at middle, and 20.9 at high school. And you can go down each category, other instructional, grant-specific, clerical, instructional support, food service, custodial grants. And we worked the millage out separately, so you could see that.
So that's PASS and the new school, the alternative school? Okay.
Now, I do not have, no, that is the regular elementary. It does not have the, wait a minute. It doesn't have the alternative school in there.
Okay.
But on the custodial, it says in middle and high school, they each went down a fourth of a person.
Yes.
They lost square footage.
Was that the whole closets
We'd have to
thing?
look at it to see. I'll make a note.
I mean, that's 2 hours, that's what they lost, still.
It may be, is there an FTE portion of that, number of students portion of that?
So is grants specific, non-funded, is that at like Title I? People paid by Title I or Title II?
It could be, yeah, it could be the titles.
Is it other things?
Well, that would be the main two. The main one would be titles.
Okay.
Despite a decrease in the unweighted FTE at middle school, I see an increase in the number of teacher units. Right, so
Yeah, and you'd have to go back and look at the detail, because sometimes you may actually see some drops in weighted, but if they're spread across several schools, you don't drop the teacher unit. Sometimes the
right.
teacher unit, So it's kind of the same effect of when you open up a charter school in the middle of a bunch of schools. They don't take exactly the same number of students out of each classroom, so you can't eliminate the teacher per school. So if you look at the detail in the back, it would probably answer that. If not, let me know. Department budget requests, so this is preliminary budget, these are the requests that they made by departments.
So, sorry, just going back, there's 35 more total non-instructional units at the elementary schools, correct?
Instructional.
Total, oh, I read it wrong. Never mind. I'm okay with that.
Okay. The Department of Budget request, this is what the departments requested. So we have that in there. We are going to have some conversations with some of the ones that, especially if they've increased. We already had a conversation with one of them today to see if one, that they're budgeting correctly, and two, do they really need to increase? So, going to have conversations with the
There were even some,
departments.
I was wondering, like, in chief of operations, let's just say it went from 199,000 to 60,000, and I know the name is different too, so I wasn't sure if that was, like, that's a pretty significant decrease.
I believe, and John can speak up if I'm incorrect, but I believe the chief of operations, they were moving some of the facilities guys out from under John's department back into facilities in
Okay.
anticipation of the building of the new schools.
Thank you.
That is correct.
But on the, you're talking about this is not salary, so.
Right, that is
This is,
non-salary.
this
This is
is
the
like, we
department
used to
budget.
get their budget, like how many reams of paper type stuff when we, back in the
I
day.
don't care about that part.
We're in the process
But that's
of
that
cleaning
was,
those
we
up.
usgt to get the budgets for like
Well, it didn't go to how many reams of
1990,
paper, but it
It
would
was
say, you know, each
office
office supplies.
each piece of software they were going to do, or how much for in-county, out-of-county travel, so on and so forth.
But-
We're in the process of cleaning those up.
Okay.
So that's why maintenance doubled.
Oh,
Is what we
maintenance.
just said, the chief of operations went down significantly. Maintenance went from 892 to 1.1. It didn't double, but it went up like by 400,000.
But there again, this is just a general repair of
Okay.
everything, right?
That
This is
wasn't for
not
the
like,
shift.
No, that's not people,
Maintenance-
this is
one
not
of the-
people, this is supplies and stuff, right?
One of the major increases on the maintenance was that they have some fire panels that they have to go to some of the schools and replace. So, and we'll assess that, because if those fire panel replacements, if that's something that we can pay for out of capital dollars, then you've got the budget in the general fund, but there will be an increase in the transfer to cover some of those increases in that budget.
So if
Right.
it's not people, we just said procurement and chief of operations was people. Did I miss that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I feel like that was confusing, so.
Okay.
Scott?
What did you say about chief of operations? We moved some of the people where?
Well, I know they moved some of the people.
But that wouldn't be
Dave,
people.
basically, Dave Parker, whom you, I can relate a name with regard to as our, times our chief building inspector was under me directly.
But this
But
is
this is a
salaries.
stuff budget.
this is not
This isn't
salary.
I think that,
That's-
But keep in mind, all
All
of
of-
the functions.
oh, yeah,
whole
gotcha.
staff, all of permitting.
So all of
you
that
know, the
went with it.
secretarial
Got it,
people,
okay.
You know, that's Rich Hatch, that's.
He cost us $130,000.
Numerous, several employees under him.
Okay, that had copiers and,
What's the transportation number? It's up there.
$3,438,000.
I know how much it is, I saw it. But what is that?
Like, I can't see it
that,
either.
that's the transportation department, that's their maintenance, that's their fuel, that's
Fuel,
their
oil.
supplies, that's their repair parts, that's everything. The
Okay.
transportation department.
That's not the bus, cost of the bus.
Chief of
That's not the cost
technology
of the
went
buses.
down.
That would be in the capital.
Yeah.
That would be in the capital.
And that's what we've got to separate out of this, because I was thinking back, maintenance only got $1 million. I remember seeing $8 million, but that was in the capital, and that's for different projects.
Right.
So that's where we have to separate it.
do we have, is grounds, is that new?
No.
I mean, okay.
No.
It-
Well,
it
because
was
we
considered-
just did the whole
It was considered
mini
warehouse and grounds at one time.
pilot.
Okay, but grounds has always been in operation.
Apparently had a zero budget in 2017.
That's because in that budget there, everything was taken into maintenance under Mike Core, and he took and budgeted out from him. Facilities was not part of him, but maintenance, that part, and there was another one that was part of his as well at that time, and it was all under his budget.
Thanks. I love that you have such detail.
Well, working in the system
Helps.
and knowing how things were done.
Okay, we're ready to move?
Please.
Okay. So
Do not bring up food service.
here's the department staff allocations. I put this back in here. This is how the budget was built, so you can see what positions were reduced or added or moved
This
from
is from-
different places.
This is from the applicant, we already approved these. These are
Yes,
the
ma'am.
ones.
Yes, ma'am. But just how it impacted the budget.
Right.
I've got a note here.
Safety and security.
Transportation somewhere? Is
Yeah.
that on this page?
Yeah, it is, right?
Yes, transportation shows 18.6 more. And that's just
It's
additional
over
bus
to the right
routes.
side.
18
I was
additional bus
wondering.
drivers?
Got a
Bus
lot of
routes.
kids.
I'm not
Wow.
sure if they're all, but we did add routes for the alternative school. I think that was 5. And then we
Five
also
was good.
added a monitor on each one of those buses, so that makes 10.
10 people,
So that's
okay.
10 of the people there, and then,
Didn't we have an unassigned? Did we add an unassigned? Is that
That was
custodians?
custodial where
Okay,
that was new.
sorry.
But the alternative's going under .75, right?
yes, so let's say
Seems so
5 will pay for some of
reasonable.
those. Yes, sir.
I know.
So, and we were running a couple of routes for the Four Corners Charter School, right?
Yes.
That we're not going to do anymore.
We're not going to do any.
So we get those bus
will
drivers
be
back.
reverted back, yes, sir.
Nice.
Okay.
It says we increased grounds total by 8.
By 8, is that
Individuals?
the,
I thought we only did it by,
There was 4
3.
custodians that were added for the.
Okay, gotcha.
And then there was,
gotcha.
and then there was the what? Can
We
you
had,
finish that?
there were 4 groundskeepers that were added for the pilot program.
well, actually, 3. One was a reinstatement of a grounds worker 3, if I'm not mistaken,
So why does it say grounds total 8?
and then 2 twos. Yes. I'm sorry, what?
So does that add up to 8?
With what he just said.
Okay,
4 custodians and then that.
got
Yeah.
it. Oh, got it. Thank you. Transportation.
We're not going to look at food service.
They should have 35 new
Very
people.
We had waiters.
We had
Yeah, I mean,
hostess.
that's right. We show you to your seat.
So that was the,
Yeah, why are our teachers doing?
So, wait,
Let's stay on the program.
Well, no, I do have, this is germane, I think.
Okay.
So a couple times, board members next to me have talked about teachers doing food duty, lunch duty. Does that happen?
does it happen?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure. They pull probably anybody they can to go in.
Uh,
It's usually non-instructional.
Right.
people that
Yeah.
are covering that, and we're trying to reduce that, and part of that is some of the workings we're doing by having quasi-supervisory approach to the food.
Oh.
Get too in-depth on that, but, it's not usually instructional.
Okay, so, but we're using, obviously, most of the time it's non-instructional folks like teachers' aides.
We're trying to
Right.
reduce that.
Or
Office.
oftentimes I see an administrator parked in a
Yeah,
cafeteria
yeah.
for 4 hours at a time or 3 hours at a time, however long lunch goes.
Middle
I mean, with
schools.
that money, could we not hire monitors, food, cafeteria monitors, and have these people go back and do their normal
Their
jobs?
That's been
actual jobs?
discussed, yes. That has been discussed.
Okay.
But with what level of authority?
The SDA is very clear that whoever it is, they cannot, food service cannot supervise the children. They can't be responsible for that. Now, they can provide service.
Seriously?
Watching the food to make sure it doesn't
They
fall on
can
the floor?
cook it, but they can't watch kids?
You cannot hire someone to supervise the children's behavior while they're in the cafeteria eating the food. You can hire someone to help them clean up, you can hire someone to help them open up their packages. You can have, you can, basically, you can say everything, but you cannot call them a monitor.
Oh,
that
okay,
does
Okay,
outside
okay.
stuff.
So
We
could we
can have
hire another
helpers. We
package
can hire
opener?
helpers.
Yes, we can.
We could hire another package
People
opener,
who
and
can
obviously if that person
open
sees
milk
something go
cartons.
wrong, they're going to report that to, or they're going to say, sit back in your seat, or stop throwing the food, or yes, you may go to the bathroom.
Yeah. And as long as there's an administrator there that can take care of behavioral issues.
Let's move on.
That still doesn't get us $13 million.
Run,
to
Scott,
use for everything
run.
else, but-
We do need to at least address the extended learning center so we can get some direction for next year's fees on that.
Oh, Lord.
So, I'll go quickly. So this is just a breakdown to show you the history of the extended learning centers for the district. You guys had kind of asked at the last time we brought this up that you wanted some more details so you can kind of see more of the budget and what we were asking for. You can see that the contractual employees, the caregiver salaries, the tutor salaries, and the district actual staff are fairly consistent across the board. They spend some of their money on other items, the movie license, the in-county travel. Some sites still have the old phones, supplies and toners and other purchase services, and then the school recognition bonus. That was in there just for 1 year. It's just an anomaly. It shouldn't be in there, but it didn't really make that much of a difference. But at the bottom line, you can see what really started this conversation was the net distributed to the schools was declining. It was $3.5 million, or excuse me, $350,000 for a few years, $450,000. So, but last year it dropped down to $150,000. We actually added some funding to that last year just to pay the schools to offset some of the losses. But it came out of the fund balance, not the general fund balance, but it came out of their fund balance, not ours. Just want to be clear about that. So you can see in 2015-16, the payouts.
Wait, hold on.
Yes.
It came out of the fund balance, but it didn't come out of ours? What is
It came out of ELC's fund balance, which is
Oh.
a different fund.
I
So
gotcha.
it didn't come out of the
Okay.
general fund. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
I should have said that was
So,
clear.
so overall, the program operated in the black. Right?
Yes.
There was 150,000 we could distribute back to
In that
schools
year.
Right.
last year.
Yes.
And in the previous years, it was significantly more than that.
Yes, and
Okay.
that's,
So the program overall is not
You
losing
did see
money,
this year's, right?
right,
right?
correct. So in 2015-16, they voted to, or agreed to pay each school at least $3,000 minimum, and then distributed the rest of it based on revenues. The 16-17 payout, you can see there's still $371,000, but they went back to a way that they only provided revenue to the schools that actually earned a revenue. In 17-18, because of the changes in the revenue structure, you can see that a lot of the schools lost funding. And then you can see the differences between the 17-18 and the 16-17. A lot of the schools use this additional funds to do things like take care of the maintenance of their playgrounds and other things in their school. So when they saw the declining in their fund source to do that, they became very concerned about why their funds were getting cut.
But pretty obviously, they didn't adjust their staffing when their revenues were dropping. That's pretty straightforward.
But the staffing is required to handle the number of students. The number of students didn't drop. The revenue dropped because the state no longer was
I wasn't here
providing.
for the previous, I think I could shed some light, because I actually dealt with Miss Summerlin on this. What year was it that the ELC funding dropped?
It started phasing out in 16-17.
Okay, so what happened was, we were, at our lower income schools, we were ELC, not ELC. So they're two different things. ELC was a state-funded program run by a coalition of people you know, that evaluated, the program evaluated the funds or the amount of money that the parent has and says, yes, you are a parent in need, and we're gonna provide you funds for your pre-elementary children and your elementary children. And that completely went away in 1 year. And when it did, I met with Julie because it was gonna be a big deal in the Leesburg area with not as many private opportunities, especially our opportunities at our ELC programs are actually really high quality also. So that was a concern in the Leesburg area. So I met with Julie and we just discussed the fact that they had a longstanding program to do scholarships to children in need. And since this funding for the ELC was drying up, that we would advertise that that families in need, especially if you had multiple children, would be eligible for funding at the principal's discretion. And I think she said that in that meeting, she said about $16,000 was allocated to scholarships. But that ELC funding was a major funding stream. So I don't know if that helps or if you already got that.
So from my understanding, from what Julia's explained to me, is that basically the state funds used to make up the difference between full pay and half pay. And because the state funds dried up, the kids that were qualified for half pay that were already participating continued to participate, but now they're only paying half the funds because they met the qualifications for half pay. So you saw a drop in revenue, but you didn't see a drop in service. You didn't see a drop in the number of students. It's just the revenue stream went down.
But it didn't go down, the revenue stream went down, but not like there were a whole bunch of those kids that we lost the funding for.
There were, yeah, like those kids, it was, for some reason, it was mostly kids who had younger siblings, so the younger siblings were getting full care at private daycares, let's say, but they were also getting funding and the ECELC decided to completely focus on children who are not elementary age.
Who are in daycares, right?
Daycares, yeah.
That's what I remember hearing, was that it wasn't school age anymore. That they
Right, and
talked about
also, there
And
was,
when
we
did that happen?
tried,
16, 17.
yeah, we tried to qualify, but there was also weird, very strange state rules on ECELC, which included, like, the size of our cafeterias weren't big enough, which is kind of ridiculous, because we feed all of our children in our cafeterias. So, there was weird rules that made it so that we couldn't qualify for ECELC.
So where is that ECELC funding or revenue? Because I think what we're seeing over here is just ELC site tuition revenue. Is that just the paid people?
So this was the revenue stream, the revenue source that they had in 15, 16, 16, 17.
Yeah,
And they were both high.
I think I'm a couple
So-
slides back from you. Okay, so I'm looking at back at the budget page of the revenue and expenses.
So it would have been the very top line, the light blue, and the ELC site tuition revenue.
Okay, so you're saying in that, so it dropped $250,000 from 16-17 to 17-18.
Yep. So,
So this
So-
is a combination of the people who are paying plus that state funding.
right, so from what Julie's explained to me, the 17-18 year was the first year that they felt the full impact of that change.
Okay, and by taking $250,000 out, then for 17-18, otherwise then it would have been at $400,000 for the payout to the schools, but instead it was only at $150,000.
Because they have the same number of kids.
Okay, and so now that's all done, right? That ELC funding, so if the program were to maintain status quo, then we would be distributing $150,000 back to schools each year. Now, you said that they use that for playground maintenance and
Yeah,
what else
schools
is,
use it for various.
I know
what
that
else are they using it for?
Treadway used it for their STEM lab.
So I guess it kind of varies based on school, what they're gonna do with the money.
Some use it for the tables, outside tables for when parents come for the kids to eat or things like that. I mean, various
I think it was
areas.
just like nice things.
Some even buy
One of the
books.
complaints that some of the principals expressed to us when we were having this conversation was, well, my school, I don't need tutors at my school, so I'm not paying for tutors. So, but then my revenue is being distributed to somebody else. Well, that was a school that didn't necessarily need tutors, because of the level of student that they were already teaching. So they felt like more like an after-school program that was more of, I hate to use the term babysitting, but more of a, just keep kids there until the parents can come pick them up. Whereas in some of our other schools that have a higher need, they need those tutors to come in. But they're not the ones who can necessarily afford that in their fee structure.
Now, when schools are using this ELC payout money, they're supposed to use it in some way that, that their school is impacted by ELC students, right?
Yes.
Or, okay.
In the past,
so because-
they've strongly required them to spend it on something that benefited that ELC program
Okay.
back.
So obviously the playground means because the ELC students use the playground. The
And I
STEM
use
lab
that as
because
an
they're.
example. I'm not sure exactly how they spent most of their funds.
Okay, right.
When we speak about what's good for kids, is it good for kids that they be in our environment and they're learning during the summer or after school, whenever these kids are there?
From my discussions
So-
with the ELC people,
so
was absolutely.
At least it's still in the black. But, so my concern only is that when you see the revenues dropping, and again, I don't have access, I guess, to the number of kids, but you don't see the expenses dropping. And it doesn't make any sense to me that we would have $200,000 drop, or roughly that, between 16 and 18, and only a $3,000 drop in the expense for the employees. That's all. So
Because you're not seeing a drop in the number of students that are participating.
that's the problem. I kept looking for number of students,
Yeah.
and I don't see that. So
In fact, enrollment has probably gone up in a lot of these schools.
It has. Enrollment stays very consistent.
that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Don't see the kids.
Right.
Well, again, again, if it's in the black and we think it's good, then we should keep doing it, I guess.
But should we raise the price is the question.
Oh, we're gonna raise the price.
Yeah, the
Well,
original.
that's
That's where we were headed. So,
For the discussion.
and I can, yeah, from the presentation. So, this shows the number of students served, and this shows the revenues and expenditures. And the main thing that I'm trying to show here is that it's not necessarily that they're losing revenues because they have less or fewer students. It's really the classification of student, whether they're full pay or half pay. It really impacts their revenues. So this is just a proposal that we put. We when we had the conversation last time, it was brought up. It was a 40% increase, and it was just on full pay. So this is what a 20% increase would look like on all. This would be full pay and half pay.
This is a week, per week, right?
Yes, ma'am. So before school would be $20 per week.
Per
Currently,
child.
now would be 24. And down the line. So if they're both, that means they're paying for before and after school care, and then after school care only. So that'd be a $35 per week to a $42 per week, and then half pay would be half of those, or 50% of each of those numbers.
So it used to be that half pay or whatever, the slight ECLC or the sliding scale or however was determined by the free and reduced lunch. And now there's no free and reduced lunch, so how is it determined?
I'm assuming that they're doing a direct certification. So if they're a direct certified student, then they would qualify.
Okay.
Jolie would have to answer that question for sure.
What is happening with summer? So is this summer rate too?
So this is not bringing up any proposed changes to summer, and one of the main reasons why is because we're still assessing whether we can continue to do a summer program if we still have to offer the security. What this does, typically your regular year funding subsidizes the summer program, and the summer program rates are so low. But if we were going to separate the programs out and make summer run on its own, what would that fee structure look like? And one of the biggest issues would be, obviously, if we have to provide security for that, then it's going to be very expensive, and probably more expensive than what most students can take on the outside.
Where does this go?
Into the community, other places is the only thing that I could offer. I mean, that we would know of.
But
And we don't know how many kids we're serving right now, total number.
And the alternative would be to possibly bring some outside agency in that wouldn't have the requirement for the full security like we would, and then allow them to do that.
Bring them onto our facility and not have to provide the security?
Well, that's the big question.
Right.
We'd have to find out whether we would still be responsible or not.
Do they go on field trips? So like the days that they do?
Once.
I think they're allowed one field trip, but some schools have asked for different funding structures, so I think they can either add or take away that one. It's flexible.
This is
What do you
summer.
want to do, Superintendent, about this?
I think the increase makes sense. I think it's very reasonable. You're asking them to pay $8 more a week for a program that they're not going to, I mean, that's, if you look at the private providers, it's far almost double that a week. So.
Let me just make just one comment about the field trip status. The reason that I ask is that it was brought to my attention that the field trips were very limited. I got a couple of girlfriends that work in daycares, and their field trips are like on steroids. I'm just gonna like put it that way. Like they go somewhere every day, sometimes 2 places a day. I have a schedule of things that they do. So as a parent, if I'm gonna need ELC, especially on the day that school is canceled, so let's go to like a teacher work day, and I can pay $40 to go for the day at the daycare, and my kid gets to go bowling and skating, or I can go to school. I'm not gonna go to, it's the price is comparable for that day, that piece that we have, because we're talking about like after school, before school, so forth. I will also tell you that the daycare in Umatilla that one of my girlfriends works at, they will charge me $10 to drop off or to pick up Emery and take her home, or Jason take him to the daycare, whereas I have to pay a weekly fee because there's not like a daily fee that I can pay. Now, I use ELC because it's much more convenient, but so when we're thinking about that, I think the cost is reasonable. I totally get it, but I also know those outside pieces that we don't do field trips, and they're gonna get a different experience going to an outside provider, and that they offer a 1-day rate where they'll pick my kid up on a Tuesday for $10 versus on a Wednesday afternoon paying
And they transport,
35.
right?
They transport. They absolutely transport. They pick them up, take them there, and I give them a $10
Right, like
check whenever I come home.
having your kid, your son go to like martial arts.
Martial
after
arts
School
after
is
school.
totally different. It's like you're getting a service.
Right. So I don't know, and I know it says like movie contract, again, you want to go watch a movie or you want to go skating? We are competing with a private provider that can provide more because they have more kids and more opportunities, whatever, but,
Or
I
kids
just,
paying a full price.
kids are paying
Right.
full price, right.
One of the advantages that this does allow us, that Emily brought up to my attention is that, you know, we may have a higher level tutor opportunity, but if we don't have that student there and have the ability for that student to stay after school on some other program, then we can't just pull that tutor in and out when they need
Right.
to
You
on
have
that
to pay them the whole
specific
time.
student. So
Yep.
these students, although they might not have that structure out of ELC on a consistent basis, if they are after school, it does give the school an additional opportunity to bring someone in on that one specific student.
Can we give them flexibility of more than one field trip a year? One field trip a year?
Well, I think what we're going to have to do is reassess the summer altogether.
Oh, summer is not even, I'm not even talking about
Yeah.
summer. I got her summer schedule and I'm telling you guys, like, the steroids comment was serious. Like, they go somewhere every single day of the summer.
At the rate we're charging, I don't see that possible when you
I
think
don't,
about the cost of
well, but if it's
transportation
comparable
and-
to the rate that they're charging, that's what I'm saying. Do you know, would I rather send my kid, I mean, I wrote the summer schedule down, about fell over. My kids would be so tired if they were going to that daycare, but it's what did I write down? $165 a week. It includes everything, everything. This is for a week. That's why I asked summer. That's totally different. But even if we're talking about our general school population and not summer at all,
Right.
are they able to do more things? Or are they being told you have to stay at school and you have to do this, you have to bring in?
I can't answer that.
Right.
What do you mean, are they being asked, they have to stay at school?
No, that was for summer. Monday through
What,
Friday,
remind us what the summer rate is a week?
Our summer rate's $70.
He didn't,
$70.
70.
So if we increase
We
them
didn't-
going
we're not bringing
somewhere
increases.
off-site, we would have to increase that to pay for the
But we may-
transportation.
We
They may not do summer. That's why he said we're not talking about summer.
But we may increase it to 125, but
Right.
then if we've got to add the security, if we find out we got to add security and cover all the time, then it may be too expensive.
Yeah, I
Right.
think
So
they
they
are.
may
two
still be
different
paying the
companies.
same amount,
They are.
still not being able to go to the field trips.
Yeah.
They're different
I think that's
conversations.
something that we've got to nail down first is security. Is that a requirement or is that,
We were wanting to go ahead and get the regular school
Regular
fee set
school
up for
year.
next year, so
Yeah.
we have to get that out and advertised to all of you.
That's it. I heard that there were some ELC coordinators that wanted to do more field trips. They wanted to offer that, but they were told they could not.
So I think your next slide
Probably
helps us
just
understand
the
the
cost.
revenue and the cost from, right?
So this
This would be with the increase?
Right. During the conversations with the principals, we were also going to address some other issues, and one of the issues is the indirect cost for the district, the school district, to offset some of the custodials, some of the electricity at the schools that get used by the ELC program. And then the site coordinator and assistant would be charged to the program before they divided off any money. The caregivers, which are required, they have to have the caregivers, so many students per caregiver. And then the distribution per student. That $270 distribution to the student would go to the school based on the number of kids that are participating at their school. And then that funding would be able to use at the principal's discretion to do things like hire tutors, or if they want to do more after-school stuff, more activities. But it gives the principal more discretion as to what they want to do with the ELC program.
Do they pay extra for the full day?
Yes. You mean before and after?
No. For the day that's teacher work day.
I couldn't answer that question. I have to ask Julie.
So are we not adjusted? We're not talking about that either. We're just talking about before school and after school right now. We're not talking about like a rate for the day that the teacher work day.
Yeah, this is just before and after, and before and after.
Okay.
So this distribution per student,
says full day.
$270, that's different than the school payout at the end?
Right, they wouldn't get an additional payout. This
There'd be no
$270
additional
would go to each school based on the number of students that they have in their program, and then they can use that at their discretion to run their program.
so that would give us pretty much about how many students are being at each site by doing that?
Those
Divide that.
numbers- Those numbers, when I did this, I used the same numbers that they had here, except I reduced them by 4%. I used
Okay.
96%, which is what we always budget, 96% of revenue.
But that 20% increase takes you from 100 and some thousand to 580, 593?
Let me, sorry, so that 20%, that 90, that'd be,
Okay, the 20% increase,
yes, would take you to $2.8 million. That 96% participation. So I'm lowering participation, anticipation, because we think that some students may not come, we may lose some students. So I went to 96% of current participation,
Right.
and then 20% increase in the revenues.
It's 2.8 expenditures.
Okay, so then they would they do their playground maintenance out of this distribution per student?
Yes, they would do their playground maintenance, they could do whatever they chose to do that they felt like benefited their ESC program and their students the most.
All right, so looking at the first one on the list, Astatula, so we would forecast that they'd get a distribution of $19,710. And last year, their payout, I'm looking for that page, I stuck together.
Should. It's right here. Astatula's payout in 17-18 was 2,000.
So they'd get a $17,000 increase in payout, basically.
Next
But
page.
they'd
Grassy
have-
Lake
but
is
they would have to pay
60,000.
for their tutors,
But now they have,
but they would have to pay for their tutors out of that.
But the schools that make the money are not the ones that need tutors.
You would still take that and distribute it across this, like the scholarships and that stuff. That would still be like the fund at the bottom, and then you would cover all the red, and then that's what's left over, correct? Goes back to the schools that generated revenue.
That's correct.
So you would still cover the other, like tutor expenses from the other schools that couldn't afford it, so to
Yes,
speak.
so
Okay,
you're
okay.
distributing money based on the number of students that they're serving and not on their profit, if they made a profit with their revenues exceeding their expenditures. So it takes out that equation of, well, do I have more half-paid students versus another school who has less half-paid students?
so are there some guidelines on how they ensure that, they say, well, gosh, tutors are expensive, I'd rather have a new playground, right? I guess that doesn't,
And we already have we don't have a school that says, I want a new playground, but what they're saying is, I want the profit that they're making off my program, and I don't want to hire tutors because I don't need them at my school.
yeah.
Scott, is Asatula the only charter school on it?
They're not-
No, no charter.
They're-
Oh, I thought, Altoona, yeah. None of the charters participate?
Okay, so okay, so going back to, so I can understand these two columns here. So the district indirect cost, 5% of revenue, that's coming back to us in the general fund somewhere?
Yes.
We have not been
That will-
capturing that in the past.
Right. We
So-
have not done that in the past.
So this $142,000 that we now goes back to our budget, what does that pay for?
It'll just go back into the general fund.
It
to
pays for
offset-
electricity?
To offset electricity costs, maintenance costs. John's guys have to go out and fix stuff for ELC.
Okay.
But is that
offset
real?
general stuff.
I mean, 142,000 on the electric part of it and everything, is that real? I mean,
That's a low percentage if you looked at percentage of expenditures or revenues across the district. It would be-
real?
well, because of the cost of, most of these are in cafeterias.
Is it a good estimate?
And so whenever you figure out the cost of the electric and everything in there to operate that
You
cafeteria,
think it's low or high?
I think it's low.
Oh, it
You
could
know,
be.
to
More than we
cover
were
all the
getting before
costs.
though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
true.
it will help offset, but I'm just, like I say, I'm from the old days. And the old days, ELC was in portables, and therefore you were able to control more of what cost was and keep the cost down as far as the school cost. And principals enjoyed that because they got a better increase back, of profit back that way. Plus, it also, ELC was responsible at that time, they had their own meters on those portables. So, and I don't think the water was that way, but I know the electric at times were that way.
We just have too
said
many
it
kids
was-
now.
When I talked to Julie about the size of the cafeterias, this actually came up, and she said the cafeterias were because they provide snacks to the kids. And
But they
then
did that
they
in the
want to
portables.
control, right, but they want to basically control the mess with the portable, in a cafeteria versus in the portables.
Some
Well,
of these
they have
programs have a lot of
convenience.
students, and then you can
Right.
put them all in one place with, because if you divide them between 10 portables, now you need 10 staff members to,
Clean the portables.
well, to watch them, to supervise the children, right? Versus if they're all in one spot, then you need fewer number of people.
That's 180.
I don't think anyone asked, what are we doing about families with multiple children?
It was in the presentation originally, I thought there was a discounted rate for multiple children. I don't see it here.
And that
though.
would stay. This is just the overall rating structure.
And what is the discount?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Whatever, it would be a 20% increase.
The column before the district indirect cost is department administration, another 5.5% of revenue.
That covers
what is that
a
like?
salary.
portion of Julie's salary, that covers, I think
Missy's.
she has a couple staff members that do district level work for the whole program, so it covers her cost. And that is existing this current year.
So that's already being paid for currently.
Yes. And those previous years, that was in there before they made distributions.
I say do the 20% of the superintendent's recommendation.
I'm with it too.
I'm just saying, whenever
We
we
will bring
do
it to
vote.
the board.
it might-
I mean,
that
do we
might be
think
how
this is
vote.
reasonable?
I was just shelling that out, just throwing that out there. I was actually talking to myself.
That's all I had today.
All right. And this is just extra here.
You done?
Yes, sir.
Whoa,
Scott,
praise
this is
Jesus.
just extra?
That is just more detail of the site, the school allocations by school.
Okay.
They're in your packet.
I'm not using ELC anymore.
All right. Anybody have anything else for Mr. Ward?
This scholarship is still an option.
was still-
Yes, I thought I heard that, sorry.
All right. I take it we're going to reserve board member comments to later in the board meeting.
Works for me.
Yeah,
That work for everybody?
yes.
Sure.
All right. And Superintendent, you have a comment? Attorney?
Oh, I did have a question. Hold on.
Oh,
Please?
Well, that's not a comment.
can't it wait?
Yeah. It was a question
40,
about
45 minutes, 50
the
minutes?
teacher, the teacher, state give money to teachers for SATs, that program,
Best and Brightest.
the Best and Brightest program. I didn't see that in the budget. Is it in there? And then
Yes,
it's
it
a
is.
complete pass-through. What is the amount of award per teacher?
That has not been determined.
I thought it was gonna go up by a lot this year, like to 10,000 or something.
Well, it's now rolled into the FFP, so they give you we're gonna get $4.2 million next year. But then we have to have conversations, obviously, to determine what those numbers are gonna end up.
So can we just give everyone an
Careful.
excellent, a 4?
Because
You have to give up to $4,000 in a recruitment bonus to specific teachers who meet certain criteria. It says up to, so it could be $1
Yep.
or $4,000, depending on how everything gets negotiated. You also have to do, and I forget the numbers, you have to forgive me because they went all over the place, but there's a specific amount for retention for highly qualified and highly effective. But they only go to certain schools that met certain criteria. Their students had to progress 3% over the last 3 or 4 years. They changed it so much, I can't keep it from memory.
Right.
But then all of the other funding that's left over can be given out to those teachers that are effective and highly effective. And it's a negotiation issue. So
Thank you.
they'll have those conversations, I'm sure.
all right, no further yes, ma'am. No further discussion. We'll be adjourned. We'll see everybody in about 50 minutes.